Chapter 1, 5 years of marriage, had proven only one thing to Talia Gardner: even the deepest love can fade and drift away. In their first year of marriage, he took her everywhere, eager to declare to the world that she was his. In their second year, he became the heir to the Sterling Group. She stood by him through every corporate battle, so exhausted that she miscarried the child in her womb. That was the first time she saw him cry. With red-rimmed eyes, he pulled her into his arms and swore he would never fail her for the rest of his life. In their third year, his work at the company piled up. He started staying out all night, and they saw each other less and less. In their fourth year, he started coming home with the faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume on him. Their meetings were filled with nothing but silence. In their fifth year, he forgot their anniversary. Talia sat alone in the living room, a table laden with cake and a full meal before her, waiting for Ethan Sterling until 10 o'clock at night. It wasn't until after midnight that he walked in, dressed in an expensive, tailor-made black suit, the chill of the night air clinging to him. He clearly froze when he saw the candlelit cake in the living room. Talia looked up. She knew he had forgotten. "Today is our 5th wedding anniversary. Let's have a piece of cake together," she said, suppressing all the bitterness in her heart. Ethan didn't refuse. He walked over silently and sat beside her, his movements as perfunctory as a business transaction. Talia produced a beautifully wrapped gift box. "This is for you, see if you like it." He took it and unwrapped it. Inside was a pair of exquisite cufflinks. Ethan gave them a cursory glance. "Thank you." The atmosphere hung in silence for a few seconds. Talia smiled bitterly to herself. She knew he had forgotten their anniversary, so how could she possibly hope he had prepared a gift for her like he used to? As expected, his voice was cold when he spoke. "I've been too busy at the company lately. I'll get you a gift next time. Let's blow out the candles and make a wish." Talia nodded quietly, closing her eyes to hide the desolation within them. Just as she was about to find another topic of conversation, Ethan's phone began to vibrate incessantly. Someone was messaging him. Upon seeing the message, Ethan's indifferent expression changed. Without a moment's hesitation, he stood up. "Something's come up at the office. I have to go." The hand she'd been using to cut the cake froze. She looked up at his rapidly retreating back, a sudden, sharp pain piercing her heart. After staring blankly for a long time, Talia's eyes finally began to redden. Once, a 17-year-old Ethan had braved a storm, crossing half the city just to see her. Now the 27-year-old Ethan was right beside her, yet he couldn't even spare the time to eat a piece of cake with her. In the vast, silent living room, only Talia remained. She mechanically scooped a mouthful of cream cake and put it in her mouth. The cloying sweetness did nothing to ease the bitterness in her heart. They had dated for 3 years and been married for 5. They had been in love for 8 years, but somewhere along the way, their relationship had withered into this tasteless state. It was utterly tragic, and there was nothing she could do. At 1 in the morning, she lay on the bed in the bedroom, eyes closed but her mind wide awake. Soon, Talia heard the door open. He was back. She didn't open her eyes, just pretended to be asleep. His movements were light, but even with her eyes closed, Talia could smell the unfamiliar perfume on him. Her heart seized, and a cruel suspicion bloomed in her mind. After his shower, Ethan quietly got into bed, turned off the light, and went to sleep. About 20 minutes later, Talia heard the steady, even breathing from the person beside her. He was asleep, but the scent of that strange perfume had already seeped deep into her mind. She opened her eyes and saw Ethan's phone on the nightstand. After a few deep breaths, she finally picked it up. He hadn't changed the passcode. It was the same one he had told her years ago. Everything was the same as before, except for the top of his chat list. There was a new, unfamiliar profile picture pinned there. Once, she had been the only one pinned to the top. It felt like she had found the key to Pandora's box, but her intuition screamed at her not to open it. Perhaps what lay inside would cast her into an abyss, but in the end, she tapped on it. The woman's name was Sylvie Sloan, an employee at his company. Their last conversation had been just a few hours ago. She had sent a message. "The power's out at my place, I'm so scared." Talia saw the timestamp and her heart jolted. That was right when she was cutting the cake. She thought of his frequent distraction during those few seconds. Who had he been thinking of then? Was it Talia, who was celebrating their anniversary with him, or Sylvie, who was afraid of a power outage? He had already given her the answer, hadn't he? He had left in such a hurry. A pang of pain shot through Talia's heart. Trembling, she opened Sylvie's social media feed. Her feed was filled with traces of Ethan. Working overtime, snuck a picture of the boss's profile. So handsome on a business trip together, flying out at midnight. He specially upgraded me to first class. So happy stayed too late at the office, got a ride home in his passenger seat. So, on all those nights he didn't come home, he had been at the company with this Sylvie. In the darkness, a cold liquid slid down her face. Talia tapped on one of Sylvie's selfies. In an instant, her breath hitched. That face, it looked so much like her younger self. Chapter 2, a face that bore a striking resemblance to her own, only younger. No wonder he made so many exceptions for this girl. Talia stared blankly for a long time, not moving until her face was streaked with tears. She fought to suppress the overwhelming pain, her hands trembling as she turned off the phone. In the darkness, even with her eyes closed, sleep was impossible. She lay awake all night. The next morning, when Ethan got up, she was still sleeping with her back to him. He was a little surprised. For the past few years, Talia had always woken up very early. But Ethan said nothing, simply washed up and left for work. Only after he had gone did Talia, who had been facing away from the door, open her eyes, which were red and swollen. For the next few days, he continued to come home very late. In the past, Talia had never suspected a thing. He carried the weight of the Sterling Group on his shoulders, and she had been with him through the company's toughest years, knowing how dedicated he was. But now, she couldn't help but wonder, was he really working overtime, or was he spending time with Sylvie? When the weekend arrived, they went to the family estate for dinner. At the dinner table, her mother-in-law, Victoria Sterling, looked at Talia's slender frame with open displeasure. "You've been married for 5 years. When on earth are you planning to have a child?" Talia's face went pale. The topic of children had always been a taboo between her and Ethan. 3 years ago, just after her father-in-law, Arthur, had passed away, the Sterling Group was at its most turbulent. Ethan was working himself to the bone day and night, and Talia was right there with him. Later, she fell gravely ill. It was during that time that she lost their child. In the hospital, Ethan, his eyes red, had gripped her hand and cried for the first time. Talia will have more children, but her body had been weakened, and despite years of trying to recuperate, she had never been able to get pregnant again. Her mother-in-law didn't know about any of this. In the past, whenever Victoria brought it up, Ethan would always shield her. But this time, he said nothing. A sourness welled up in Talia's heart. "I'll try my best." Victoria was long tired of that line. She had never liked Talia, who came from an ordinary family with such uncouth parents. If Ethan hadn't defied his parents back then, kneeling in the ancestral hall for 3 days and 3 nights, insisting on marrying her, a prestigious family like the Sterlings would never have let her in. "Enough, I don't want to hear it." After dinner, Victoria handed her a large bag of medication. "These are all for fertility. Make sure you take them seriously." Talia looked troubled, but Ethan just glanced at the bag and said coolly, "Mom wants you to take it, so just take it." Only then was Victoria satisfied, adding sternly, "You must get pregnant within 3 months." It was nearly noon when they returned home. Talia poured a glass of warm water and stared at the bag of medicine, hesitating for a long time before finally taking out a box to take them. Just then, Ethan came out of the bedroom with something in his hands and saw her preparing to take the pills. He commented nonchalantly, "You're certainly obedient." Seeing his indifferent expression, Talia's hand paused. She looked up at him, her eyes red. "Ethan, do you still want to have a child with me?" He froze, not answering. His expression seemed to darken, and he left the house. After a long while, when the water in the glass was almost cold, Talia finally tilted her head back and swallowed the pills. She took them for a week straight, but her body showed no reaction. The weather grew colder as the city settled into winter, and the Sterling Group's annual gala was approaching. Every year, there was a dance at the gala, and every year, Talia attended as Ethan's partner. She assumed this year would be the same and had already prepared a blue velvet gown for herself. Looking at the dress, Talia's mind drifted back 5 years to their graduation ball. She had worn a gown of the same color as Ethan's dance partner. At the end of the night, in front of all their classmates, he had knelt on one knee and proposed to her. Talia, for the rest of my life, you are my only dance partner. Will you marry me? From school uniforms to a wedding dress, they married right after graduation. They were young then, their love so abundant it felt like it was overflowing, so abundant that the Talia of today couldn't bring herself to believe that Ethan's love for her could ever disappear. Until the day of the gala. Talia waited at home alone from dawn until dusk. She waited, but Ethan never came to pick her up. Wearing the gown she had so carefully prepared, she stared at the empty doorway, her heart growing colder by the inch. Just then, her phone vibrated. Chapter 3, she had received 2 messages. One was a photo, the other was text. In the photo, a tuxedo-clad Ethan was dancing with a young girl, his hand in hers. The girl's face bore a striking resemblance to a younger Talia. Her pupils trembled. As she scrolled down and saw the text message, she froze completely. He promised to be my dance partner every year from now on, by the way. It was late when Ethan finally came home. Talia, dressed in her pajamas, sat on the edge of the bed, looking at him quietly. Today was the company gala. Why didn't you take me? Ethan took off his suit jacket without even glancing at her. It wasn't necessary. You could just rest at home. With that, he walked straight to the bathroom, as if it were a matter of no importance. But it had been the most sincere promise he had ever made to her when they were young. Talia's heart ached with a sour pain. She wanted so badly to show him the text message and confront him, but to her dismay, she found she didn't have the courage. She was afraid. Afraid that once everything was out in the open, they could never go back to the way they were. When Ethan came out of the shower, he saw Talia already lying on her side, clearly having nothing more to say to him. A complex expression flickered in his eyes. When Talia woke up, the space beside her was empty. She silently got out of bed and was startled by the sudden, urgent ringing of the phone. She answered, and Merle Gardner's impatient voice came through. Talia, your grandmother had a heart attack. She's in critical condition. You should come see her one last time and handle the arrangements. Boom! A thunderclap seemed to strike right over Talia's head. Before she could even process it, her mother had already hung up impatiently. Growing up, her parents had always favored her younger brother. Her grandmother was the only person in the entire Gardner family who had ever truly loved her. The last time they spoke, her grandmother had said she wanted Talia to bring Ethan to visit. But because Ethan was always busy, they had kept putting it off. She never imagined that this would be their last chance to see each other. Talia's hands trembled as she quickly dialed Ethan's number. It rang for a long time before he finally answered. Ethan's cool voice came through the line. What is it? Talia, too frantic to care about his coldness, spoke with a sob in her voice. My grandma's in the hospital. She's not going to make it. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then, Ethan said, You go first, I'll be there shortly. Talia hung up and rushed to the hospital. On the other end, Ethan called his executive assistant into the office. Cancel my afternoon schedule, postpone it for 3 days. The assistant was shocked. Mr. Sterling, but that's... Just do it, Ethan interrupted in a low, firm voice. At the hospital. Her parents, Walter and Meryl, were at home cooking for her brother. They hadn't even bothered to come. But Talia had no time to dwell on her parents' cold-heartedness. She walked to the hospital bed and looked at her frail, emaciated grandmother, tears instantly streaming down her face. She knelt by the bed, holding her grandmother's hand. Grandma, it's Talia, I'm here to see you. The old woman was on the verge of death and could no longer speak, but tears welled up in her eyes the moment she saw Talia. Her wrinkled hand tightened its grip on Talia's. She managed to squeeze out a few words from her throat. My little girl, be good. Ethan, you too must be happy, be happy. Talia's tears fell like rain. She knew her grandmother's greatest concern was her happiness, that she wanted her and Ethan to be happy together. Grandma, we're doing great. Ethan will be here soon. Chapter 4, Talia thought that when Ethan said, shortly, he meant in 10 or 20 minutes. But an hour passed, then 3, then 5. And still, there was no sign of him. Her grandmother was fading fast, and she would only be at peace if she saw Talia and Ethan together. Talia could only take out her phone and repeatedly dial Ethan's number. But this time, the call went unanswered for a long time. Once, twice, 3 times, he didn't pick up. Her grandmother was slipping away. Seeing Talia desperately making calls, she grasped her hand, her voice raspy. My little girl, is he still good to you? Talia suppressed the ache in her heart and quickly explained, Grandma, he's always been wonderful to me, really. But even in her frail state, the old woman's heart was clear. Tears welled in her eyes. My little girl, never let yourself be wronged. After Grandma's gone, you'll only have Ethan. You must be happy. The sentence came out in broken fragments. As she uttered the last word, the old woman's hand slowly went limp and her eyes closed for the last time. Talia felt as if she had been plunged into an icy abyss. The phone slipped from her hand and crashed to the floor. Grandma, her grandmother, was gone. Talia had no memory of what happened next. It was as if her soul had been ripped from her body. She watched numbly as the white sheet was pulled over her grandmother, watched numbly as the doctors wheeled her away. Her parents and brother reacted to the news of her grandmother's death with indifference, as if an unimportant person had simply passed away. Only Talia was left, trapped in an overwhelming sea of despair, yet still forced to handle the funeral arrangements alone. Ethan never answered her calls again, and he never showed up. She had believed he was just busy with work and had stood her up again. It wasn't until the night of the wake, as she knelt before the memorial altar, that she received a photo from an unknown number. Do you know why he didn't come back to be with you? Because I got sick, and he was taking care of me. Attached to the message was a photo of Ethan, sitting by a hospital bed, tenderly and meticulously peeling an apple. In that moment, Talia felt a deafening roar in her head, and she couldn't hear a thing. So, the reason he broke his promise, the reason he didn't even come to see her grandmother one last time, was because he had to take care of Sylvie. Staring at the photo, her breathing became ragged. The world started to spin, and a flash of white light exploded before her eyes. She fainted right there in the memorial hall. When she woke up, she was staring at the ceiling of a hospital room. Ethan, whom she hadn't seen for days, was sitting by her bed. When he saw her wake up, he handed her a glass of water and asked gently, "Is your head still spinning?" Talia hadn't seen this gentle side of Ethan in a very long time, but she didn't take the glass of water. She just stared at Ethan's handsome face. He was the love of her youth, but now, looking at him felt like looking at a stranger. His outstretched hand froze slightly in midair. He placed the water glass on the table beside them. He made no mention of his absence over the past few days, only saying, "The doctor said you're suffering from extreme exhaustion and need to rest. Grandma's funeral is over. I'll take you home later." Talia remained silent, just looking at him with her red, swollen eyes. Why? Why could he still act so calm? She closed her eyes and finally spoke her first words since waking up. "Ethan, let's get a divorce." Chapter 5. Ethan's dark eyes narrowed instantly. He spun around to face her. "What did you say?" "Let's get a divorce. I'll have a lawyer draft the papers," she repeated calmly, her eyes filled with exhaustion. "I'll move out of the house in the next few days." But Ethan's eyes reddened, and he suddenly grabbed her hand. Why do you want a divorce?" "Why?" Talia found the question laughable. Perhaps she should throw all the messages that woman had sent her in his face, scream at him, and tell him, "You're the one who betrayed our vows, you're the one who betrayed our love, so how can you ask me why with such a straight face?" But she was just too tired. She had no energy or desire for hysterics. Talia closed her eyes and pulled her hand back. "I'm tired. I want to leave some dignity for us. Let's get a divorce. I can't do this anymore." The hospital room fell into a dead silence. Ethan's dark eyes stared intently at her. Finally, he spat out 2 words, "I refuse." Talia couldn't help but retort, "On what grounds do you refuse? When I was at my lowest, my most helpless, where were you? When my grandmother was waiting to see you one last time, where were you then?" As she expected, Ethan's body tensed at her words. The pain in Talia's heart intensified. She knew he couldn't answer, and she no longer needed his answer. "Let's just leave it at that. We can part on good terms." In the end, she propped up her still weak body, left the hospital, and went back to her parents' house. When she arrived, her mother, Muriel, didn't say a single word of concern about her health. Instead, she complained, "Why are you back alone again? Where's Ethan?" Ethan hadn't appeared at all during the funeral, and Muriel had long felt a sense of crisis, terrified of losing this son-in-law. "Did you two have a fight? Ethan is a rich young master. It's normal for him to have a bit of a temper. You need to be more patient." Even knowing Merle wouldn't care about her feelings, Talia still asked in a low voice, "Mom, if I'm not happy with Ethan, can I get a divorce?" The word divorce seemed to be Merle's trigger point. She immediately exploded. "Divorce? Are you insane? You're not happy being a rich man's wife. I think you're just being dramatic. You just dare to get a divorce. Your brother is getting married, and we're still waiting for you to pay the bride price. If we need money, we have to ask your husband for it." Faced with her crass family, Talia had always chosen to endure. But this time, she was uncharacteristically firm. "But I've already asked him for a divorce." Merle was stunned. In a fit of rage, she swung her hand and slapped Talia hard across the face. Smack! The sound drew her father, Walter, over. He was shocked to see the red palm print on Talia's face. "What's going on?" Merle said irritably. "She wants to divorce Ethan. Tell me, is she stupid? Throwing away a good life to ask for a divorce?" As expected, Walter's expression also turned serious. "Talia, don't joke about things like this. Why would you get a divorce?" The stinging pain on her right cheek was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Talia looked at her parents and felt a chill run through her. They didn't even bother to ask her why she wanted a divorce. Their only concern was losing the Sterling family's money, so they just forcefully forbade her from doing it. She said nothing more, just silently and stubbornly returned to her room and locked the door. That evening, no one called her out for dinner. Talia lay numbly on the bed, her right cheek now visibly red and swollen. But she just cried quietly, letting her tears soak the pillow. She didn't sleep all night. The next morning, she suddenly received a call from her mother-in-law, Victoria. On the phone, Victoria's voice was filled with rage. "Talia, have your parents lost their minds? Isn't the money Ethan has given them over the years enough? How dare they come to the company and cause a scene today? My son must have had the worst luck in 8 lifetimes to marry you." Chapter 6. Talia immediately pushed open her bedroom door and saw that her parents were indeed not at home. Remembering how they had opposed the divorce yesterday, a wave of shame washed over her. She immediately ran towards the Sterling Group headquarters. When she arrived, the company was quiet. She didn't hear the loud arguments she had expected, but the strange looks everyone gave her were a constant reminder that her parents had definitely been there and made a scene. Talia felt as if her face was being roasted over a fire. She clenched her fists and walked silently towards the elevator. Other employees nearby were whispering. "Mrs. Sterling is here too. Did she find out her parents came to cause trouble? I can't believe her parents are such vulgar people." Mr. Sterling's face was black just now. "I heard they only quieted down after he gave them a card. They were just here for money." Talia's nails dug into her palms. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. Upon entering the CEO's office, she saw an impassive Ethan. He met her gaze calmly, but Talia found she couldn't look him in the eye. Her parents were sitting inside, beaming. When Merle saw Talia, she snorted. "Just in time. Talia, dear, you need to clear up any misunderstandings with Ethan. You even made us elders come and solve this for you." Solve it? Was coming here to demand money her way of solving things? Talia's face turned ashen. "Who told you to come here? It was for your own good. Who told you to ask for a divorce? Ethan, dear, don't get the wrong idea. Our Talia never truly wanted to leave you. You've been together for so many years. How could she bear to divorce you?" Merle casually brushed aside the topic of divorce, intentionally letting Talia see the bank card Ethan had just given her. That card felt like a rope binding Talia to this trapped marriage, a rope she could never escape from. Talia felt utterly powerless, unable to say another word. Finally, with their goal achieved, Merle and Walter prepared to leave. "We'll be going now. You two can talk." They quickly left, leaving only Talia and Ethan in the office. She thought of the bank card her mother had been clutching so tightly. It felt like a lump of cotton was stuck in her throat. After a long moment, she managed to say, "I'm sorry." Ethan, lost in some thought, replied indifferently, "It's not the first time anyway." Talia bit her lip, the burning sensation on her face even worse than when she was slapped yesterday. She was about to say something when the office door opened again. A young girl in a white blouse walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Mrs. Sterling, here is your coffee." Hearing the delicate voice, Talia looked up and her gaze instantly froze. It was that face, the one that was 60% similar to her younger self. It was the face from the countless anonymous photos she had received recently. Sylvie Sloan. Sylvie smiled sweetly, placing the coffee on the table before walking over to Ethan. "Mr. Sterling, your coffee. I added a little extra sugar today. Please try it." Ethan had always been particular about what he consumed, preferring his coffee bitter. Yet, he had no objection to Sylvie's unsolicited change. He even took a small sip and said warmly, "Not bad." Talia couldn't watch any longer. She shot up from her seat and left the office without a word. Ethan watched her leave, not saying anything to stop her, his eyes unreadable and deep. It started to rain lightly on her way back. Talia, as if not feeling it at all, ran desperately forward. By the time she was almost home, the drizzle had turned into a downpour. But standing at the entrance, she saw the door to her parents' house was shut tight and all her luggage had been thrown outside. She immediately ran over and knocked on the door. "Dad, Mom," but no matter how long she knocked, even as she became soaked to the bone, the door remained closed. From inside, she could faintly hear Merle's crass voice. "Hurry up and get back to the Sterlings if you dare to divorce Ethan. Don't even think about coming back to this family." In that moment, she felt the sky and the earth crack apart. Her body slowly sank to the ground, and tears finally streamed down her face. Once, she thought the Gardner house was her home, but it wasn't. Later, she thought the Sterling mansion was her home, but it wasn't. It turned out she never had a home at all. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan drove up. He forcefully lifted her into his arms, carried her to the car, and took her home. In the Sterling villa, Talia's face was streaked with wetness, and she shivered uncontrollably. Ethan knelt before her, gently drying her with a soft, dry towel. He wiped her hair, her hands, over and over again. Neither of them spoke, but a mist slowly gathered in Talia's eyes. In the blur, it was as if she saw the Ethan of the past. He seemed to have split into two people. One still cared for her and loved her as he used to. The other was cold and distant, even keeping a woman who looked just like her by his side. A wave of desolation rose in her heart again, and she let a single tear slide from the corner of her eye. Chapter 7, "Ethan, you don't want a divorce, do you?" she suddenly asked, her voice hoarse. His hand, holding the towel, paused. He looked at her. "No." The atmosphere fell silent for a long time. Finally, as if she had accepted her fate, Talia spoke. She finally understood that he had always been the one in control of this marriage. Only he could decide when it would end. Even if he clearly had someone else, as long as he didn't agree to a divorce, she could never leave. Talia spoke, her voice hollow. "I understand." After that day, Talia stopped mentioning divorce. It seemed she had returned to her old self, quietly staying at home. But her spirits dwindled. She always seemed melancholic, and her interactions with Ethan became fewer and fewer. A few days later, at lunch, she took a sip of the chicken soup the housekeeper had made. A sudden wave of nausea roiled in her stomach, and she felt incredibly sick. The housekeeper quickly handed her a trash can. Seeing Talia's pale face, the housekeeper hesitated before saying, "Ma'am, your reaction is a bit like morning sickness." Could it be? Talia froze. Because she hadn't been able to conceive for several years, she had never considered the possibility of pregnancy. But now that she thought about it, her period was indeed late this month. That afternoon, Talia went to the hospital for a checkup by herself. In the hospital lobby, she saw two unexpected people, Ethan and Sylvie. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, looking at her. Talia's hand, hanging by her side, trembled slightly. "And why are you here?" Sylvie, seeing Talia's pale complexion, smiled and explained, "Mrs. Sterling, please don't misunderstand. I was feeling dizzy at work, and Mr. Sterling, being a concerned boss, accompanied me for a checkup." Looking at the scene before her, Talia felt a bitter ache in her heart. She had come alone to see if she was pregnant, while her husband was busy caring for another woman's health. Talia took a deep breath, suppressing the bitterness. "My stomach is upset. I came for a checkup." Sylvie, standing behind Ethan, gave a triumphant smile, then put on a frail act and tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Sterling, they've called my number. Let's go." He glanced at Talia, but ultimately left with Sylvie. Talia stood there, stunned. She watched until their figures disappeared before walking like a zombie towards the obstetrics and gynecology department. A few hours later, the test results were out. She sat on a bench in the hallway, staring at the report that clearly stated, "Pregnancy. 4 weeks." The child she had longed for had finally arrived, but the pregnancy report in her hands felt scorching hot. Why now? Her marriage with Ethan had reached this point. Should she even keep this child? She sat in a daze for a long time, then slowly reached out and placed a hand on her lower abdomen. Though she couldn't feel its presence yet, Talia's heart seemed to soften in an instant. "Talia?" A voice suddenly came from behind her. She looked up and saw Dr. Evan Donovan in a white coat. He was her senior from high school and happened to be a doctor at this hospital. "Evan." Evan walked over, his voice filled with concern. "What's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Talia stood up. "I'm pregnant. I came for a checkup and was about to get my prescription." Evan was taken aback. He saw the pregnancy report in her hand and then noticed Talia's bewildered state. His sense of professional duty kicked in, and he took her arm. "Why are you here alone? You look pale. Let me walk with you to the pharmacy." Talia nodded. As they walked together, two nurses suddenly rushed past with a stretcher. Evan quickly pulled Talia aside to prevent her from being hit. Talia gently steadied herself against him. "Thank you." This exact scene was witnessed by Ethan and Sylvie from a distance. Sylvie smiled faintly. "She seems quite close to that doctor." Chapter 8. Ethan watched Talia's retreating back in silence, his face turning completely cold. After a few seconds, he looked grimly at Sylvie. "Don't forget what your purpose is." Sylvie's face went white. Just as she was about to speak, Ethan tossed a card at her. Without waiting to see if her checkup was finished, he turned and left. Sylvie watched him go, feeling resentful. She then looked at Talia's back, and a sinister smile spread across her face as an idea came to her. After confirming her pregnancy, Talia was torn, unsure whether to tell Ethan. He was the child's father and had a right to know. But the image of him accompanying Sylvie to the hospital was like a fishbone lodged deep in her heart. Soon, however, Talia realized her dilemma was pointless. Since that day, Ethan hadn't come home for several days in a row. 3 days later, Talia sat alone in the empty living room. Outside, darkness had fallen without her noticing. She assumed Ethan wouldn't be back today either. Just as she stood up to go to the bedroom, her phone vibrated. It was from that same unknown number. This time, it wasn't a taunting message, just an image. Talia opened it, and upon seeing the words, her blood seemed to freeze in her veins. It was Sylvie's pregnancy report. Just then, the sound of the front door opening came from the entryway. Talia turned her head stiffly and saw Ethan, who had been absent for days, finally walk in. Their eyes met. Talia slowly put down her phone, her hands clenched tightly to stop them from trembling. Ethan walked up to her and said coldly, "Let's get a divorce." Talia's heart jolted again. Seeing his emotionless expression, she immediately thought of Sylvie's pregnancy report. It seemed to explain everything. Why he had accompanied Sylvie to the hospital, why he hadn't come home for days, why he had refused a divorce before but was now proposing it himself. It was simply because Sylvie was pregnant too. Because he already had a woman who was 60% similar to her, but younger. Because he had long since fallen in love with someone else. Talia's heart felt as if it were being sliced apart, but her eyes were numb and empty. She didn't speak for a long time. After a while, she lowered her gaze and said in a pale voice, "All right." But hearing her answer, Ethan's expression soured, a dark undercurrent in his eyes. A few seconds later, he said coldly, "You will receive your fair share of the assets. I will also handle your parents." But Talia shook her head. "I don't want any of your assets." She hadn't married into the Sterling family for money. She had married him because he was Ethan Sterling. But now, he had failed her. Talia stared at Ethan and said slowly, "Take me on a 30-day divorce trip. If you do, I'll agree to the divorce. Is that okay?" Ethan was stunned. He looked at her, his deep eyes unreadable as he studied her calm face. Finally, he nodded. "Okay." Talia forced a smile, but there was no trace of joy in her eyes. "After the trip is over, we'll get a divorce." After she said this, she turned and went back to the bedroom. Once out of Ethan's sight, her tears finally began to fall. These 30 days would be her final, self-deceiving dream. When it was over, she would let go of their 8-year relationship. They set off on their journey soon after. There was no need to plan an itinerary. Every place she wanted to go was a place she and Ethan had once visited together. Chapter 9. First stop, they went to a majestic, snow-capped mountain range in the Swiss Alps. Here, on this sacred, snowy peak, she and Ethan had once embraced and kissed, vowing to be together for a lifetime. Second stop, they went to Rome. The hallowed halls of the Colosseum had also witnessed their love. Drinking espresso with Ethan here again, Talia remembered the first time. She hadn't liked the bitter taste and had secretly poured the rest of hers into his cup, even adding a pinch of salt. He had pulled her into his arms, kissing her and playfully asking if she was done being mischievous. Third stop, they went to Yosemite National Park. She remembered getting severe altitude sickness on their last visit. In her feverish haze, she had snuggled against Ethan's hand, whimpering about how unwell she felt. He had held her tenderly in his arms, stroking her back and comforting her. Fourth stop, they went to a quaint lakeside town in Italy. Talia had once said that when they grew old, she wanted to retire to a place just like this with him. At the time, she had even excitedly planned out their entire retirement. Fifth stop, they went to a ski resort in Aspen. Ethan had taught her to ski here. She had fallen countless times, curling up in his arms and whining that she didn't want to learn anymore. He had coaxed her, yet patiently persisted until she learned. Visiting every place filled with memories, 30 days passed by so quickly. On the last day, their final destination was a scenic overlook not far from their home. The peak wasn't high, but the view was breathtaking. After climbing to the top, they stood quietly, gazing at the scenery. "Do you remember? Our first date was here," Talia suddenly said. "Coming here one last time before the divorce, it brings things full circle." This was the first time in a month she had mentioned the word divorce. Ethan froze, turning to look at her profile, his heart a tangle of complex emotions. He was about to speak when he heard her continue. "Ethan, do you still love me?" His hands slowly clenched into fists. He remained silent for a while but ultimately said nothing. Talia smiled, her eyes red, and finished the sentence for him. The 17-year-old Ethan would love Talia forever. The 27-year-old Ethan doesn't love Talia anymore. Ethan, if the 17-year-old you could see the 27-year-old you, what would he think? The atmosphere became incredibly oppressive. Ethan's face darkened. He tugged at his tie and, without a word, turned and walked away towards a nearby shop to buy water. As he was leaving the shop, a couple walked past him, clutching their chests, their voices filled with the relief of a narrow escape. That was terrifying. I saw her jump right off the summit. It looked like she jumped because of love troubles. Ethan's pupils contracted. For some reason, he immediately thought of Talia. His throat tightened. He quickly grabbed the couple. "Where is the person who jumped?" The couple, startled by his bloodshot eyes, quickly pointed behind them. "Right over there." The water bottle fell from Ethan's hand. His heart lurched violently. That was the exact spot where he and Talia had been standing. He ran like a madman, screaming Talia's name, but he couldn't see her anywhere. Talia, staring down at the bottomless cliff, Ethan was consumed by panic, his heart pounding relentlessly. But just then, a soft voice came from behind him. "I'm here." Ethan spun around and saw Talia standing there, safe and sound. The tension in his heart finally released. Talia said softly, "It wasn't me who jumped. I'm not that foolish to kill myself for love." She walked to his side. "Don't worry. Since I agreed to the divorce, I won't pester you anymore. I will live a good life. And I wish you and Sylvie happiness." But hearing her words, Ethan's expression darkened. He clenched his hands, his handsome brows furrowed tightly. As if he could no longer hold back, he suddenly grabbed her hand. "You're this nonchalant about divorcing me?" Talia was taken aback, then gave a bitter smile. "If I said I cared, would you not get the divorce?" Chapter 10, a tightness seized Ethan's heart, but in the end, he slowly let go of her hand. That simple act of letting go sent a soul-tearing pain through Talia. Perhaps he still loved her. How could he not? They had been so in love when they were young for so many years. But now, he loved Sylvie more. So for Sylvie, he let her go. She silently turned away and spoke calmly. "I'll see you at the city hall in 3 days." 3 days later. The city, which hadn't seen snow in years, suddenly welcomed its first snowfall of the season. That day, Talia woke up early, got dressed, put on some light makeup, and wrapped a scarf around her neck before heading out. Waiting at a red light, Talia stopped and caught a snowflake in her palm. The icy touch brought back a memory. 5 years ago, on the day they got their marriage license, it had also been a snowy day. Back then, Talia had joyfully hugged him. Ethan, it's snowing. They say if a couple is caught in the first snow together, their hair will turn white together. Come on, let's get sprinkled." Ethan didn't believe in such things, but he had still stood in the snow with her, and they had kissed in the falling flakes. To be showered by the same snow today means we have shared a lifetime. Talia suddenly shivered, pulled back from her memories, only to realize her face was streaked with tears. The vows of the past had not come true. Their marriage had finally reached its end. They would never grow old together. She gave a bitter smile and, in a daze, started to cross the street. She didn't notice a car with failing brakes speeding towards her from the left. 3 seconds later, bang, a massive impact echoed through the air. Talia felt her entire body being thrown high into the air, then crashing heavily onto the ground. After what felt like an eternity, her consciousness seemed to detach from her brain. Though her vision was black, she could hear a cacophony of sounds. Screams, murmurs, the urgent wail of an ambulance. Suddenly, the sounds faded away. In her once quiet mind, a reel of images began to flash, one after another her most precious memories. Ethan, his ears red in the moonlight, kissing her. Ethan, braving a storm, crossing half the city to set off fireworks for her. Ethan, his eyes red, staying up all night by her side when she had a fever. Ethan, holding her in his arms, tears in his eyes, swearing to never fail her. Every single one of her memories featured Ethan. Finally, she was back at that ball 5 years ago. She saw Ethan kneeling on one knee before her in front of everyone. "Talia, will you marry me?" 5 years ago, she had said yes. 5 years later, she reached out a blood-soaked hand, trying to grasp his, tears streaming down her face. I won't marry you anymore, Ethan, loving you. It hurts too much." In an instant, the world went black. At the city hall, the appointed time had come, but Talia was nowhere to be seen. Ethan stared at the thin layer of snow accumulating on the ground, his thoughts unreadable, his eyes as dark as ink. The snow began to fall more heavily, blanketing him. He frowned, about to dial her number. But in the next second, his phone rang first. Thinking it was Talia, Ethan casually answered. But the voice on the other end was a strange woman's. "Hello, may I ask if you are the husband of Miss Talia Gardner?" A sense of unease rose in his heart. He said grimly, "Who is this?" There was a moment of silence, then the voice spoke again. "We're from City Central Hospital. We are very sorry to inform you that Miss Talia Gardner passed away at 12:08 p.m. due to injuries sustained in a car accident. 2 lives were lost. Please come to the hospital to claim the body." Chapter 11, perhaps when a truth is too painful to believe, people choose to escape. Just like Ethan. Even as the unease in his heart intensified, he chose not to face the terror and despair of reality. Although his words were filled with disbelief, if you listened closely, you could hear the stubbornness and bitterness in his voice. The doctor stated bluntly that she would not joke about a person's life and death, adding that if the body was not claimed within 3 days, it would be cremated. If the ashes were not claimed within 60 days, they would be disposed of by the funeral home by default. When Ethan learned that Talia's parents hadn't gone to the hospital either, he seemed to gain more confidence that the body might simply be someone who had Talia's belongings, perhaps someone who had been with her. "How did you identify the body as Talia Gardner? She isn't pregnant. After what happened 3 years ago, it's very difficult for her to conceive." The doctor, seeing that Ethan still refused to believe the fact of Talia's death, considered that he was overwhelmed by grief, especially since 2 lives were lost. The doctor decided to take a step back and try to persuade him. "How about this, Mr. Sterling? Please come to the hospital today or tomorrow to see for yourself. It won't take up much of your time." Hearing the doctor suggest he come and see the body himself, Ethan fell silent for a long time. Finally, he asked hoarsely, "If it's Talia, why didn't you call her parents first?" He heard the doctor sigh before patiently explaining. The police found a phone in a purse at the accident scene. Although the phone's surface was damaged, it was still functional. "In the contacts, we only saw your name saved with a label. The other contacts were just strings of numbers." Why was that? Why was he the only contact in Talia's phone with a name? With no other choice, Ethan agreed to go to the hospital that afternoon to see if the body really was Talia's. But even as he stubbornly refused to believe it, he was terrified. Terrified that the person really was Talia, and terrified that the accident was his fault. Ethan found Merle Gardner's contact information in a group chat. The username looked like a phone number. He called, his heart filled with apprehension. Merle answered quickly, but her first words were, "Ethan, dear, has Talia apologized to you? We've had a word with her. How about we just forget this whole divorce thing?" Ethan couldn't understand why Talia's parents were so against their divorce. They were always interfering in their marital affairs. Suddenly, a thought occurred to Ethan, and he said, "I haven't seen Talia. She told me to be ready to go to the city hall for the divorce in a few days." Hearing about the divorce, Merle immediately became agitated. "To the city hall for a divorce? Ethan, listen to me, she's just saying that, playing around. Don't listen to her. Once I find her and give her a good talking to, it'll all be fine. Don't you dare agree to it." Ethan ignored Merle's words and said, "But if Talia wants a divorce, it means we're not happy together. And given Talia's personality, she wouldn't joke about something like this." Chapter 12, Merle was left speechless by Ethan's words. But Talia had finally married into a wealthy family, and her son's bride price was still unsettled. If Talia and Ethan divorced, her son might not be able to get married because of the money. At this thought, Merle hastily made up an excuse to brush the matter aside. "Ethan, Talia was just upset about something else recently, so she's been a bit emotional. You can't take what she says seriously." Seeing that Merle still wasn't getting to the main point, Ethan said directly, "It's not Talia's fault. It's that I also feel that being with her is not what I want." Merle stubbornly tried to salvage the situation. After all, they had lived together for 5 years. Although they had lost a child before, another one would come sooner or later. Talia was capable and a good homemaker. But no matter what excuses Merle came up with, Ethan insisted on divorcing Talia. In a fit of anger, she began to curse Talia. "So useless. I told her long ago to get some money for her brother's bride price. Fine if she didn't want to, but now she's made such a mess of things." Although Merle muttered under her breath, deliberately lowering her voice, Ethan heard every word clearly. She said Talia was supposed to get money for her brother's bride price, and Talia refused. Ethan's face immediately turned cold. He questioned her icily. "What did you just say?" Only then did Merle realize she had let it slip. But she figured since they were getting a divorce anyway, there was no reason to keep up the pretense. "You heard me, didn't you? What's with all the questions? I knew raising her was useless. A Mrs. Sterling, yet she's not willing to give a single cent to her brother. Only knows how to enjoy life by herself. Guess she needs a few more scoldings and beatings to listen." Now, Ethan seemed to understand why Talia had sold the bags and jewelry he had given her. So this was the reason? Talia is your own daughter. How could you treat her like this for a good-for-nothing son? Merle didn't hear the rest of his words. Her focus was entirely on good-for-nothing son. Her only concern was for her son. "Let me tell you, Ethan Sterling, you're not my son-in-law anymore. Don't you dare take your anger out on my son. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up." Before Ethan could say anything, Merle hung up. Ethan felt even more certain about one thing: Talia was most likely not with him for his money. The ones who cared about money were just Merle Gardner. Thinking about it, the previous incidents of them causing trouble were likely Merle's own doing, having nothing to do with Talia at all. Ethan had misunderstood Talia. Chapter 13, as scheduled, Ethan was to go to the hospital that afternoon. It was a personal trip, and he usually wouldn't ask his assistant to accompany him, but today was different. Ethan felt he couldn't grip the steering wheel, so he could only sit in the back seat, his eyes vacant. He kept sending messages to Talia, as if the more he sent, the greater the chance of a reply. But the chat window remained stubbornly one-sided, with only him typing. The assistant, seeing Ethan's state, didn't dare say a word from the front seat. Ethan looked grim and somber, his eyes lifeless. After what felt like an eternity, the car finally reached the hospital entrance. Ethan just stood there, staring at the hospital, not daring to take a step inside. The assistant had to speak up from the side. "Mr. Sterling, let's go in and take a look. What if the person inside isn't the missus? Wouldn't we be sad for nothing?" Those words were very effective for Ethan. He turned to look at the assistant, and a flicker of life returned to his eyes. Yes, the person inside might not be her. Yes, it could be a mistake. With that mindset, Ethan walked in. When the doctor saw him and realized he was Talia's husband, a look of relief washed over her face. But seeing the doctor's expression, the stone in Ethan's heart felt as heavy as a mountain. The closer he got to the morgue, the faster his heart beat. The moment he stepped inside, he felt the place was colder than anywhere else. It was dark, with only a faint white light from above. The atmosphere was oppressive. The doctor first told them to prepare themselves mentally, then went to a wall of compartments and pulled one out. The first thing that met their eyes was a white sheet covering a body. Was the person lying under that white sheet Talia? The doctor slowly began to lift the part of the sheet covering the face. The pale, lifeless face of the person underneath was revealed. The moment Ethan saw it, he stumbled backward. Thankfully, the assistant was quick and caught him from behind. As the assistant moved closer, he too saw that the body lying there was indeed Talia's. Seeing their expressions, the doctor knew they finally believed it. She asked, "Mr. Sterling, you should take the body home today. It's such a tragedy. There was a baby in her womb, too." Ethan clearly remembered that after the last accident, the chances of her conceiving were very slim. And now he was being told 2 lives were lost. His family had always wanted a child. If she had given birth, she could have secured her position as Mrs. Sterling and established herself firmly in the Sterling family. The doctor handed him a phone and a lab report. The report confirmed a pregnancy of 4 weeks. The date was from the last time he had taken Sylvie to the hospital. So that day, it wasn't an upset stomach at all. It was pregnancy. Why hadn't Talia been willing to talk about this? If she had just told him, he wouldn't have gone along with Sylvie's act. He wouldn't have gotten jealous seeing Talia with that doctor and proposed a divorce. They wouldn't have arranged to go to the city hall, and this accident wouldn't have happened. Ethan's eyes turned red. He looked at the phone in his hand and tried to unlock it using Talia's birthday. Chapter 14, but the words "incorrect password" flashed on the screen. Suddenly, Ethan couldn't think of any other possible password. The assistant beside him saw Ethan's hand hovering over the password screen and offered a suggestion. "Mr. Sterling, could the password be your birthday?" Ethan thought to himself, Talia was only after my money, she didn't love me. Why would she use my birthday as her password? Who knew that as soon as he tried it, his birthday unlocked Talia's phone? Ethan stared in shock at the unlocked screen. The wallpaper was a photo of the 2 of them taken on a trip 4 years ago. His emotions were a mix of shock, confusion, and a hint of lingering affection. It was as if a long-held belief had suddenly crumbled, and he didn't dare face the new reality. It felt like this was all a dream, fabricated by his mind's desperate longing. Ethan couldn't help but ask his assistant, "Tell me, would someone set their password as the birthday of a person they don't love?" The assistant didn't know why Ethan was asking this question, as the answer was obvious. No. Ethan frantically opened the photo gallery. It was filled with pictures of himself and Talia. There wasn't a single photo of her family. The contacts were just as the doctor had said. Only Ethan's number was saved with the label hubby. The others were just simple strings of numbers, even sorted into a group named unimportant people. Only Ethan's name was in a group called the most important person. Why had Ethan ever thought Talia didn't love him? What on earth had he been thinking? Could someone who didn't love him really keep all these things? Ethan quickly opened Talia's messaging app and saw their chat history. Only then did he realize how absurd his previous suspicions about Talia had been. Every word, every sentence in their chat history struck him like a hammer, revealing Talia's deep love for him. For all these years, even when forced by his mother to drink all sorts of fertility concoctions, she had done so willingly, never once complaining to him. The one time she had been scolded by his mother, Ethan had happened to be there, but had chosen to stand by and do nothing. And what Ethan had believed to be Talia's greed for their family's money was all false. Talia had never cared about wealth. She had genuinely loved him. And yet, he had constantly misunderstood her, even finding another woman to provoke her. Faced with so much pressure, Talia's parents offered no comfort. Instead, they constantly demanded money from her for their son, all while verbally abusing her. Ethan clenched his fists, the guilt in his heart twisting into something else. His eyes turned bloodshot. He took the phone and walked toward Talia. Ethan wanted to say something, but his throat choked up. The corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably, and his lips began to tremble. Tears, like a bursting dam, streamed down his cheeks. He wept in despair. The entire morgue was filled with the sound of his crying. To give him space, the doctor left first, reminding him on her way out to take Talia home today. The assistant also stepped out to wait by the door. Chapter 15, Ethan looked at Talia's pale face, unable to imagine that the person who seemed to have been with him just yesterday had become this. He gradually realized that he was one of the main culprits responsible for all of this. Ethan stayed there, leaning against the gurney, keeping Talia company for a long time. After a while, his phone rang with a call from Sylvie. He merely glanced at it and ignored it. During the half-month he had been traveling with Talia, Sylvie had also called him incessantly. But during that time, Ethan's eyes and heart were only for Talia. No one else could disturb their private world. Just then, Talia's phone vibrated again. Ethan thought it was a message from her parents. But when he saw it, he realized how absurd his previous fantasies had been. Ethan first glanced at the sender. It was a familiar string of numbers. The messages were filled with all sorts of taunts. How could he not know who it was? It was Sylvie. On the surface, she was acting according to his instructions to test Talia, but behind his back, she had done so many things to deliberately provoke her. Do you know why he didn't come back to be with you? Because I got sick, and he was taking care of me. Old hag, he promised to be my dance partner every year from now on, by the way. His eyes contracted sharply. Looking at these messages, a bloodthirsty killing intent emerged. At this moment, Ethan wished he could go confront Sylvie right away and ruin her completely. But reason told him he couldn't show such an ugly expression in front of Talia. The muscles in his face quickly relaxed. Remembering what the doctor had said, he knew he had to take Talia home first. Yes, take her home. Without another word, Ethan lifted Talia from the gurney. The door was suddenly pushed open, startling the assistant outside. He looked down and saw Ethan holding Talia in his arms, clearly stunned for a moment. The doctor, who was returning, happened to see this scene. Although she didn't find the action particularly strange, she still suggested they cover the deceased with a piece of clothing or that the hospital could arrange for a vehicle to take them back. Ethan told his assistant to take off his jacket and covered Talia with it. The doctor then let them leave. After returning home, Ethan placed Talia on the bed in their room. Victoria, in the living room, saw Ethan rush into the room carrying Talia and thought something had happened, so she followed him. She immediately saw the pregnancy report in Ethan's hand. 4 weeks pregnant? Victoria was ecstatic to learn this news, even remarking that the fertility medicine she had given her had worked. She turned to leave, muttering about preparing some things to support the pregnancy and prevent another accident. But it was obvious that Ethan's expression was grim, and the assistant beside him looked troubled and didn't dare to speak. Victoria asked, confused, "What's wrong? Why aren't you happy that Talia is pregnant?" She then glanced at the date on the report and moved closer to look at Talia, noticing her pale face. The thought of a miscarriage quickly came to her mind. But before Victoria could speak, Ethan's hoarse voice reached her ears. "She's dead." Chapter 16, What? At first, Victoria didn't believe it, but Talia's pale face looked exactly like that of a dead person. Just moments ago, she was overjoyed about Talia's pregnancy, and now she had plunged into the depths of despair. She even questioned why he would bring a dead person home instead of asking how she died or what had happened. Initially, Ethan had thought his mother was just anxious for a grandchild, which was why she had been so strict with her. But now it seemed it was more than just that. Knowing her daughter-in-law was dead and her grandson was also dead, her first reaction wasn't sadness, but disgust. Ethan couldn't help but question her. "Mom, what is this attitude? Talia is your daughter-in-law, and the baby in her womb is your own grandson. How can you say that?" Victoria, however, felt she had done nothing wrong and even justified her words. "She is indeed my daughter-in-law, and the baby in her womb is indeed my grandson, but they're dead. What grandson is there if they're dead?" Ethan looked at his mother's current state and found her incredibly unfamiliar. When he had first married Talia, her attitude hadn't been like this. She had been very concerned and worried about Talia's health and well-being. "Mom, you clearly liked Talia before. I thought you were just desperate for a grandchild recently, but I never expected." Victoria gave Talia a disgusted look, then said to Ethan, "When did I ever like her? If it wasn't for the fact that you liked her and I was trying to save your face, I would never have put on that act. Lately, I've seen you getting tired of her, which is the right way to be." Her family is poor, utterly destitute, and she still dreamed of marrying into our family. I bet she doesn't even like you. She's just after your money." These words had no effect on Ethan anymore, because everything on the phone indicated that Talia truly loved him and hadn't been constantly spending his money. "Mom, you're mistaken. Talia never asked me for money. I was the one who gave it to her voluntarily." Victoria couldn't listen to these words. After all, whether Talia asked for it or Ethan gave it directly, it still counted as taking money from their sterling family. And besides, I have always loved Talia. I have not grown tired of her. Perhaps it was his recent attitude that made his mother feel he no longer loved Talia. If even an outsider could see it, had Talia long sensed his cold and indifferent attitude? Is that why she had been so insistent on divorcing him? Victoria curled her lip into a smile. "How is that possible? Weren't you just with that girl, Sylvie, recently? You two seemed quite close." Ethan saw the look of expectation and satisfaction in Victoria's eyes for a fleeting moment, but he bluntly revealed his true purpose for being with Sylvie. "I was just using her. I just wanted to make Talia jealous, to make sure her heart was only for me." After he told Victoria the truth about his relationship with Sylvie, she suddenly froze. She never expected this to be the reason. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but she quickly masked the sorrow in her eyes. Victoria thought to herself, anyway, Talia is already dead, Ethan will have to find someone new eventually. She then appeared very calm and composed, saying, "It's okay, Ethan. You'll fall in love with someone else and give Mom a big, healthy grandson." He looked at the expression on Victoria's face and remained motionless for a long time. Then, he said firmly to her, "I will not marry anyone else." Chapter 17, this statement was like a bombshell, turning Victoria's face shades of green and purple. She saw the firm and resolute look in Ethan's eyes. It wasn't a pretense. Only then did Victoria start to panic. She was about to offer an explanation, but Ethan's assistant escorted her out. Ethan took a long time to accept this reality. When he decided to hold a funeral for Talia, he called Merle. "Hello." After her previous words, Merle knew that getting any more money from the Sterling family was hopeless. She had been racking her brain for a solution to her son's bride price problem, so her tone was not very pleasant. "May I ask what the great Mr. Sterling wants? I'm very busy, you know." Ethan, seeing Merle's poor attitude, and the fact that his own daughter had been missing for nearly a month without a single call from them to check on her whereabouts or safety, only ever asking for money, felt a surge of anger. "Aren't you worried about your own daughter at all?" Merle found this question hilarious. "She's a grown woman, why should I worry about her? Is she going to get lost like a child? Besides, she doesn't give me any money, so why should I care? She can go wherever she wants. It has nothing to do with us." Ethan was disgusted by their attitude and was on the verge of cursing, but he suppressed the violent emotion within him and said, "I'm holding a funeral tomorrow. You should come." Merle was confused. "You're divorced now, so you don't need our family to attend your funerals. Talia is devoted to you, though. You should just have her go." But he ignored whatever Merle said and stated directly, "It's Talia's funeral." On the other end of the line, Merle, who had been rubbing her temples due to a headache and resting with her eyes closed, burst out laughing. "Talia is getting more and more capable, isn't she? Not only does she refuse to give us money, she won't even help with her brother's bride price, and now she's even got you to act along with her to avoid giving us money." Then her tone turned unfriendly, laced with heavy contempt and disdain. "What did she offer you? Tell me about it." Seeing that Merle didn't believe a word he said, Ethan finally understood the helplessness and sorrow the doctor must have felt when she had informed him. But her tone clearly indicated she didn't care about Talia at all. Ethan didn't want to argue further and said directly, "Come or not, it's up to you. I'm having Talia's body cremated tomorrow anyway. I'm her legal husband, and I won't let you see the ashes." At this, hearing Ethan's firm tone, Merle began to feel that something was wrong. Just as she was about to ask something, the call was disconnected. Walter, who was beside her, saw Merle frowning and staring at her phone. "What's wrong?" Merle told Walter what had just happened. More importantly, he said Talia is dead. This news also shocked Walter. Hearing his daughter was dead, he rationally considered the possibility. Because he knew Ethan's character, he knew that something this important was probably not a joke. He then told her to call Talia's number, but that number had already been deactivated by Ethan, and the phone was still with him. Walter waited for Merle's response, only to hear her say, "The number is out of service." Chapter 18, but Merle clearly didn't take the matter seriously. It was only Walter who called Ethan that night. "Ethan, what you told Merle earlier, was it true?" Ethan initially wanted to retort because he felt Talia's parents were not good to her. But then he remembered that the conversations between Talia and her father on her phone seemed relatively normal. "It's true. Talia was in a car accident. I'm planning to have her body cremated tomorrow. She was 4 weeks pregnant." As soon as he finished speaking, Ethan began to sob. His genuine emotion finally convinced Walter that what Ethan said was true. Walter asked Ethan for the location of the cremation, saying he would be there tomorrow. After hanging up, Walter took a long time to process the news in his room. The daughter who had been so full of life just a short while ago was now gone. He couldn't help but feel immense grief. But soon, he heard the sound of things being smashed outside. Walter immediately opened his door and rushed out to see Merle smashing things in what used to be Talia's room. Walter immediately demanded to know what she was doing. Merle even proudly showed off her handiwork to Walter. "She never sent any money home. We raised her for nothing. Why keep this ungrateful wretch's things?" Walter didn't know how to convince her to believe that their daughter was dead. He then saw Merle throw a porcelain doll, Talia's favorite, to the ground. The loud crash attracted the curiosity of their son from the next room. Walter, unable to bear it any longer, roared at Merle, "What are you doing?" Merle, facing Walter's anger, just felt bewildered. Her tone was dismissive as she let out a chuckle. "It's just some worthless junk." Then, seeing her son at the door, she took him and left. Walter looked down at the shattered porcelain doll, a flicker of pain in his eyes. He had originally planned to bring a gift for her tomorrow. He never thought it would be destroyed like this. The next day, at Talia's funeral, Walter had to drag Merle along. Seeing that the arrangements looked real, even though she started to feel a flicker of doubt, she still stubbornly insisted she didn't believe it. But the further in they walked, the more they saw the photo displayed was indeed Talia. Ethan's distraught expression didn't look like an act. Soon, Ethan, holding Talia's urn, noticed them and had his assistant greet them. The assistant explained the entire sequence of events and even showed them the surveillance footage of the accident. The person lying in a pool of blood was their daughter. Only then did Merle truly begin to believe that her daughter was really dead, and she was carrying a 4-week-old child. Ethan knelt there, holding the urn, and began to talk to himself. "When did you start to think," he said, his voice choking, "that I didn't love you anymore? But I did. I love you, Talia. I just thought you were only with me for my money, that you didn't love me. That's why I tried to find out, to see if you would get jealous when you saw me with someone else, to see if it would make you unhappy. It seems you were unhappy. You did love me." Chapter 19, Ethan's eyes reddened without him realizing it. He pulled the urn closer and gently, tenderly kissed it. He truly regretted it, regretted everything he had done. He regretted making a deal with Sylvie, never imagining her intentions could be so malicious. He then looked down at the urn. "You've become so small. I used to be able to hold you in my arms." The more he spoke, the more regret Ethan felt. Ethan clutched the urn, tears streaming down his face, crying for his own foolishness and for Talia's cruelty. She never told him anything, never explained anything. The burden she carried in her heart was far greater than he had ever imagined. "I don't know if ghosts exist, but if they do, you have to stay by my side and watch me, watch what I've become without you." He then remembered all the photos of them together on Talia's phone, and fresh tears of grief began to fall. In front of Talia's smiling black and white portrait, only he was crying his heart out. At first, Merle thought they were just acting, but when the hard reality was laid before her, she began to feel afraid. Muttering, it's not real," she ran away, but tears were streaming from the corners of her eyes. Walter, worried that Merle wouldn't be able to handle it and might do something foolish, quickly chased after her. It felt like only yesterday they were walking hand in hand down the street, but now only Ethan and his shadow remained. That night, Ethan placed the urn on his nightstand, then got up to take a shower. If not for the fear that Talia would find his scent unpleasant, Ethan wouldn't have let go for even a second. He quickly came out of the bathroom and began choosing clothes in front of the urn. As he put on the outfit Talia liked best, he saw a bandage on his body. It was from a cut he had gotten while insisting on preparing all the funeral arrangements himself. It was on his back, near his neck. With his shirt unbuttoned, the bandage was faintly visible. Ethan couldn't accept Talia seeing even the slightest imperfection. Otherwise, she would surely call him careless again. He imagined Talia seeing the bandage, her brow furrowing in concern, and he began to panic. He imagined her frowning at the scar. He hurriedly buttoned his shirt and put on a suit jacket. Only when he was sure the wound was hidden did he smile and ask Talia, "How do I look? Is this outfit nice?" But whether it was ugly or beautiful, panicked or proud, it was all useless now. "I must look very handsome, right? This is your favorite outfit on me. It's just this wound. It's okay, I'll be better soon." He had forgotten that the one he loved was gone, and no one cared anymore. Chapter 20, by the time morning came, Ethan was like a completely different person, a stark contrast to the man he had been the day before. He first made a call, then had his assistant drive him to a restaurant. When Ethan got out of the car, he looked around and then glanced inside, where someone was smiling at him. But Sylvie had no idea what was about to befall her. He sat down across from Sylvie, who immediately started to question him in a cloying voice about what he had been doing for the past month, and why he hadn't answered her calls. Ethan simply brushed it off with a vague, "busy with work." Then he changed the subject. "How have you been lately?" Sylvie began to play the victim. "I've missed you so much, so I haven't been doing well." But what followed was not Ethan's comfort. He simply reached into his pocket, took out a phone, unlocked it, and showed her the messages she had sent to Talia. He licked his lips, and a cold, mocking chuckle rippled through the air, sending shivers down her spine. "Well, does this look familiar?" Sylvie immediately panicked, unsure how to explain. But her mind raced, and she quickly came up with a cover story. "I was just helping you, Ethan." Wasn't the point to make Talia jealous by saying those things? But the Ethan of today was not about to fall for her ridiculous explanation. "Is that so? I see you haven't been doing well lately. I suppose your conscience is bothering you?" Sylvie gave an awkward laugh. "Ethan, what are you talking about? There are too many people here. Let's go somewhere else to talk." Ethan's attitude was firm. "We're talking right here." She stuck to her story that she had done those things to help him provoke Talia. "Sylvie, are you going to tell me you didn't start taking the act seriously? If I were to call you a homewrecker, would you deny it?" Hearing Ethan threaten her reputation, Sylvie started to deny the accusation. "You were the one who asked me to act. What did you get your feelings hurt and now you can't handle it?" His eyes were red, his breathing heavy, and a vein throbbed on his forehead. It looked as if he was about to tear the person opposite him to shreds. Handle it. Ethan was now extremely sensitive to that word. "Sylvie, let me tell you, if you don't start telling the truth, I'll release the photos of you sleeping in a hotel room last night." Hearing this, Sylvie went berserk. When she received Ethan's call telling her to check into a hotel, she had thought he was going to spend the night with her. She never imagined he had this in mind. No wonder she had lost consciousness after drinking that glass of water yesterday. It was Ethan who had drugged her. "You're so cruel." Ethan laughed in fury. "I'm cruel, and what about the things you did? Weren't they cruel? I warned you time and again not to do anything extra, but you just wouldn't listen. Now your retribution has come." The desire for revenge condensed at his fingertips. The chopstick in his hand instantly shattered into pieces. Sylvie was terrified by this version of Ethan. Fearing he would actually do something, she blurted out her true intentions and thoughts. "Yes, I wanted to use the act to get ahead. I wanted to break you and Talia up, so what? You're the one who hired me. You didn't know that people are always greedy. You gave me so many benefits. Of course I wanted to stay by your side forever and get rid of that extra person. Is that so wrong?" Before she could finish, Ethan's eyes flashed with rage. He slammed his fist on the table, startling all the other customers in the restaurant. All eyes turned to them. Chapter 21, Ethan took a deep breath, clenching his fists, trying to suppress the fire raging within him. He was filled with even more regret for using Sylvie to test Talia. But regret was useless now. The only thing to do was to make these people pay. Seeing Sylvie admit her guilt, Ethan's brow furrowed tightly. He glanced at her, a strange glint in his eye, and let out a soft, meaningful humph. Finally willing to tell the truth? Good. He then picked up the phone from the table and showed her the screen, which was recording. When Sylvie saw this, she panicked and tried to snatch the phone from him. But Ethan pulled his hand back and continued speaking to himself. If I were to post this on your company's official website, do you think your company, for the sake of its reputation, would still want someone like you? This job was one she had worked hard to find, one with a suitable salary. Without Ethan's financial support, she couldn't afford to lose this job. I'll leave, all right? Why do you have to destroy everything I have? We can just go explain to Talia, can't we? Ethan's eyes were dark, but a smile played on his lips. He then kicked the table over. The assistant beside him began to disperse the crowd and told the manager that they would cover all the damages for the day. The manager, seeing the assistant present a black card with $1 million balance, didn't interfere and put up a closed for business sign. I destroyed everything you have. Isn't that what's supposed to happen? Sylvie clearly didn't understand what Ethan meant. Seeing the situation escalate, she began to panic. She saw Ethan charging at her like a bloodthirsty wolf and instinctively tried to retreat. Ethan walked straight towards her, his eyes bloodshot, his hands gripping her shoulders so tightly they trembled. You made me lose everything too. Shouldn't I get my revenge? Even her voice began to tremble. Your company didn't go bankrupt, you didn't go broke. What did I make you lose? Ethan spat out 2 words through his teeth, Talia. She's dead. Sylvie's eyes first showed shock, which then gradually turned to disbelief and defiance. How is that possible? She was perfectly fine at the hospital just a while ago. If you want revenge, you should at least come up with a believable excuse. Who would believe that? Do you think I'm a child you can easily fool? Ethan's face turned ashen, his eyes wide with rage. Do you think I would joke about something like this? Only then did Sylvie look at Ethan in terror. Although she wanted the position of Mrs. Sterling, she had never intended to drive Talia to her death. She just wanted her to back off. She had also never seen Ethan so out of control. How did she die? Ethan didn't want to talk about it with Sylvie. Reliving it would only cause him more pain. Besides, he had no patience to waste on her. With her photo and the recording on his phone, he had what he needed. The recording had to be released. As for the photo, Chapter 22, I just want you to disappear from my sight and my life forever. If you do, I'll pretend this photo never existed. But if I ever hear your name, or if you ever appear in my line of sight again, I, Ethan Sterling, swear I will post these photos all over the internet and let everyone see how a trollop like you seduces people. Ethan made his words as harsh as possible. He needed Sylvie to disappear. Under duress, Sylvie agreed to everything. Ethan couldn't send her to prison, so this was all he could do. After dealing with this matter, Ethan stayed at home. He didn't go to the company, nor did he leave his room. He just sat by the window, holding Talia's urn, lost in a daze. Sometimes, he would take her to the garden for a while. Victoria brought him meals, but Ethan didn't eat a single bite. Seeing him go days without eating, Victoria began to worry. She even consulted a doctor about Ethan's condition. But the doctor said his condition was entirely psychological. The blow was too great, and he was immersed in grief, unwilling to come out and face reality. The advice given was that a sickness of the heart requires a medicine for the heart. The doctors couldn't pull him out of his grief. They could only let it run its course and even play along with him. If what they said contradicted his beliefs, he might not be able to accept it and could resort to extreme measures. One day, the cemetery administrator called Ethan, saying that Victoria had chosen a tombstone for Talia and wanted him to come and see it. When Ethan received the call, his expression turned terrifyingly grim. The moment he hung up, he roared at Victoria, asking why she had to meddle. Then he had his assistant drive him there, muttering incessantly about destroying the tombstone. On the way, Ethan suddenly saw something and told the assistant to stop the car. As soon as the car stopped, he quickly got out. Ethan saw Talia. He rushed towards her, and at that moment, Talia saw him. She smiled and waved at him. Ethan, what are you doing here? Seeing that Talia wasn't angry with him anymore, Ethan's hands hung awkwardly at his sides. He was so nervous he couldn't even speak. She took his trembling hand, her eyes like autumn pools, and looked at him deeply, a gentle smile playing on her lips. The real touch, the warmth, left Ethan at a loss for how to react. Talia was standing right in front of him, alive. That meant the person in the car accident wasn't her. He knew it. He knew his intuition was right. And the phone, wallet, and pregnancy report were just things she happened to be carrying. But thinking about all the things he had done to Talia, even collaborating with Sylvie, a wave of guilt and fear washed over him. Seeing her still holding his hand, he felt incredibly ashamed. He quickly pulled his hand back and hid it behind him. But Talia didn't seem to mind what had happened in the past. She naturally took his hand again, pressing it against the back of her own, and whispered, "Hold on." It was as if she knew he was worried whether she was a dream or real. Ethan's lips moved, and finally a hoarse voice emerged. "Talia, have you forgiven me?" Talia's eyes curved into crescents, and that starry gaze was just like it was all those years ago. The first time Ethan saw Talia, he was captivated by those starry eyes. Talia's voice, as enchanting as a gentle breeze, floated over. Her lips were curved in a smile as she whispered, "I don't blame you." Hearing these words, the stone in Ethan's heart finally lifted. He excitedly pulled Talia into his arms. Chapter 23, Ethan explained to Talia that everything he had done and said before was to test whether she truly loved him. Talia tilted her head and looked at Ethan with a frown. Ethan, thinking she was about to blame him, quickly explained, "I heard from someone that you were with me for my money and not because you genuinely loved me. I was so in love with you at the time, I couldn't accept that fact, so I conspired with Sylvie to act in front of you. But I really didn't expect Sylvie to be so manipulative and do so many things to hurt you behind my back. When I found out, I taught her a harsh lesson. She shouldn't dare to show her face in front of us again." Talia didn't get angry after hearing this. "It's okay, but we've been married for so long and I've even carried 2 of your children. Why would you think I don't love you?" Ethan pursed his lips, his voice a little hoarse as he said, "It's because I love you too much that I was afraid. Afraid that you didn't really love me, so I tried to find other ways to confirm it." He was terrified that Talia would get angry and bring up divorce again, but she didn't. She just kept saying she didn't blame him. After Ethan finished explaining, he asked Talia where she had been all this time. They all thought she was dead. They had even held a funeral, and her urn was still at his house. Talia frowned and told Ethan she had only been staying elsewhere for a few days because she didn't want to go through with the divorce and had chosen to escape. Hearing this, Ethan felt even more guilty. He said that he initially didn't believe she was dead, but it was because the body was laid out before him, and her phone and the hospital reports were all found at the accident scene. But when Talia heard about the so-called evidence, she was confused. She then slowly took out her phone and the pregnancy report from that day from her bag. Ethan stared in disbelief at the phone and report that should have been in his room. The phone screen was completely intact. He recalled that the phone he had received from the doctor had a shattered screen. But now, it was perfectly fine in Talia's hands, and everything Ethan knew to be true had, according to Talia, never happened. She had never gotten in the car to go to the city hall that day, there was no car accident, and she certainly hadn't died. Suddenly, Ethan couldn't make sense of anything that had happened. His brow was furrowed tightly, and he couldn't relax. Looking at the living, breathing Talia in front of him, Ethan couldn't help but doubt himself. Had everything he experienced been a dream? He unlocked Talia's phone and indeed saw all the messages Sylvie had sent. So what was going on? In the end, Ethan could only think of one solution: take Talia back to his room to see the things for herself. Talia, half believing and half doubting, went back home with Ethan. On the way, she sat in the back seat, absent-minded and a little nervous. Chapter 24, Ethan, noticing her state, reached out to hold her hand. He had also noticed the change in his mother recently. His steady voice held a hint of a smile as he comforted her. "Don't be nervous. My mom adores you now, although what happened before was her fault and I shouldn't have let her pressure you about having a child." Talia smiled faintly, and the worry in her heart gradually dissipated. She stroked her belly. "Now that I'm pregnant, Mom won't rush me anymore." Ethan's voice was low and rich, tinged with pleasure. When Ethan brought Talia home unexpectedly, Victoria looked at him with a shocked expression. Ethan then led Talia directly into his room and told her the urn was on the nightstand. The phone and the report were there too, but when he looked over, he didn't see the urn or the other items that should have been there. What was going on? Talia smiled at Ethan and voiced her final guess and thought. Ethan, you didn't want to divorce me either, did you? Is that why you made up all these lies? But saying things like that is still not very auspicious. Even though you know the truth now and are too embarrassed to apologize, it's okay. I forgive you. I don't want to divorce you either, especially since I have a child in my belly. Although Ethan didn't know what was going on, with all those things gone and back in Talia's hands, it didn't matter. Whether it was all a dream he had woven or a play he had staged out of fear of explaining things to Talia, he didn't want to dwell on the reasons. All that mattered was that Talia was back by his side. Victoria, outside the door, watched the scene unfold with a strange expression. When Ethan noticed her, he quickly explained that everything that had happened before was fake. The real Talia had never died, she was back now. Ethan's previous listless state had vanished. Seeing this, Victoria covered her mouth and cried with joy. Ethan's voice was low, with a hint of a smile. He thought Victoria was crying with happiness because Talia had returned. He immediately said to Talia, "See? Mom was so worried about you. She's crying with joy now that you're back." Talia nodded. Victoria, remembering how he hadn't eaten for so long, immediately went to the kitchen and brought the prepared food to his room. The moment Ethan saw the food, he asked Talia if she was hungry. Talia clutched her stomach. "I'm not hungry, but I think the one in my belly is." Ethan immediately understood what Talia meant, but when he saw only one set of utensils in Victoria's hands, his face instantly turned cold. His voice, as calm as water, cut through the air, full of displeasure. "Mom, why did you only bring one set of utensils? Talia is hungry too." Victoria was shocked, then glanced at the space beside Ethan. "Oh, okay, I'll go get another set." Only then did Ethan's expression soften. His voice became low and rich, with a hint of a smile. "Okay, thank you, Mom." Chapter 25. He hadn't eaten much in the past few days, but even so, he didn't just focus on himself. He constantly paid attention to how much Talia was eating, what she wanted to eat, and helped her to food. Victoria, seeing Ethan finally eating after so many days, showed a look of relief and reassurance on her face. As they were eating, Talia noticed Ethan staring at her and stopped her actions. "What's wrong, Ethan? Why are you staring at me? Is there something on my face?" These past few days, Ethan had been thinking about how to live without Talia. He loved her so much that he had been terrified of losing her, afraid that their long marriage was all a lie. During the time Talia was dead, after taking his revenge, Ethan had no idea what he could do or what he should do. He had no motivation for anything, not even to maintain a normal life. Eating, drinking, he felt like he would just throw it all up the next second. Ethan's voice, usually steady, trembled. It was a light, floating sound, like a kite with a broken string, completely losing its usual composure and calmness. "Nothing, I just miss you a lot." Talia chuckled and said to Ethan, "I miss you too. We'll be together every day from now on." It was a rare sunny winter day. Ethan took Talia to their garden to sit. Talia used to take care of these flowers. In her absence these past few days, some of them had wilted a bit, but it looked like they could still be saved. Talia familiarly went to the room to get a watering can, filled it with water, added a few other things, and began to water the flowers and plants in the garden. She only stopped after watering a full round. Just as she was standing there resting, she felt a shadow fall over her. Ethan bent down, his hot breath brushing against her neck. She froze, her heart pounding uncontrollably. Ethan was still immersed in the joy of having her back, a hint of disbelief still in his thoughts. After what seemed like a long time, Ethan's dry throat finally produced a thin, strained voice, forced out by longing. "Thank you for your hard work, Talia. It's all my fault for not taking good care of these flowers for you." Talia sighed softly and reached out to stroke Ethan's head. "It's okay. You thought something had happened to me, that's why you were so down. I don't blame you. Besides, these flowers aren't dead yet. In a few days, they'll be back to how they were." This garden was a surprise Ethan had personally prepared for Talia before they were married. Because Talia loved flowers and had once said she wished she could see them all year round. So Ethan had built a greenhouse garden in his backyard. The flowers here bloomed all year round, just like his love for Talia, eternal and unchanging. From now on, no matter what happened, Ethan would always trust Talia first. If anything similar occurred, he would ask her directly. That way, misunderstandings like the one before would never happen again. Chapter 26. As winter set in, the temperature dropped day by day. Every morning when Ethan woke up, he would remind Talia to wear more clothes before he could feel at ease and focus on his work. With the baby at 6 weeks, Ethan also repeatedly instructed his mother to take good care of Talia, which Victoria agreed to. Sometimes, when he was particularly worried, Ethan would simply work from home, choosing not to go to the company when it wasn't necessary. After all, nothing was more important than his child. This morning, Ethan did go out to work, but he finished everything he needed to do at the company by noon and rushed straight back home. When he arrived, he saw Victoria eating lunch. Ethan noticed there was only one set of utensils on the table, and the dishes were all things that were not suitable for pregnancy. His eyes, which had been full of anticipation to see his wife and child, instantly darkened. Victoria was also surprised by Ethan's sudden return. Seeing her single set of utensils, she realized what was wrong. She immediately explained, "Ethan, it's not what you think. I just asked Talia, and she said she ate too much this morning and isn't hungry yet, so I didn't make her portion. But there's chicken soup simmering for her in the kitchen." Even though Ethan knew he shouldn't be so suspicious of his own mother, her past attitude towards Talia made it impossible for him to completely trust her. To be sure, he went to the kitchen to check. Seeing that there was indeed chicken soup simmering, he finally relaxed. When he came out, he said to Victoria, "Mom, I'll go in and check on Talia then." Victoria nodded, a complicated expression on her face as she watched Ethan's back. When Ethan went in, he saw Talia lying on the bed, stroking her belly with a smile on her face. Talia was stunned to see Ethan's sudden return and was about to get up to greet him. But Ethan, with a doting tone, immediately told her not to get up. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the 6-week belly that wasn't showing yet, and teased, "Talia, if you keep stroking it like this child will definitely only be close to you when it's born." This made Talia laugh. She reached out, took Ethan's hand, and placed it on her belly. "Then you should touch it more too, so the baby will be close to both of us." Ethan could feel that although no change was visible and her belly was the same as before, when he touched it, he could feel a slight protrusion. The feeling was a bit strange and wonderful. He smiled slightly, his clear, rich voice as if soaked in the warm noon air. "Then if Talia gives birth to a daughter, and she's close to me, don't you get jealous?" Talia tilted her head slightly to look at Ethan, then lowered her eyes in thought for a moment before retorting, "Then if it's a son, and he clings to me day and night, you're not allowed to be jealous either." Ethan instantly realized he had forgotten about that possibility. His possessiveness was the same as before, prone to jealousy. Even if it was his own son, Ethan felt he couldn't help but be angry. "No, I'll be jealous." Talia looked at the man beside her as if he were a child and said with a laugh, "So you're allowed to be close to our daughter, but I'm not allowed to be close to our son. How can you be so cruel?" Chapter 27, though her words were blaming, her tone was gentle, with a hint of a coquettish, pouting feel. In the end, Ethan thought of a solution that would prevent both of them from getting jealous. That was to let their parents take care of the child. Talia didn't agree with Ethan's idea. "Mom and Dad have worked hard enough taking care of us. Now they have to help us raise our child? They're not nannies." Ethan thought about it and felt that Talia had a point. "Then what should we do?" The thought of Talia and his son clinging to each other day and night instantly made Ethan unhappy. Talia comforted him, "While the baby hasn't been born yet, we can go out for more walks." As soon as she finished speaking, Talia heard a low "okay" from the person beside her. His warm voice was low and gentle, with an almost irrepressible smile. But after agreeing to go out, the thought of the baby in her belly made Ethan regret it. It was cold outside, but with the heating on inside, there was no need to worry about catching a cold. If he took Talia out, a pregnant woman's resistance would likely be lower. What if she caught a cold from going out? Talia, as if she could read Ethan's mind, immediately picked up her phone and said, "The temperature today is 5 degrees Celsius. It's fine, we'll just wear more clothes. Besides, the doctor said more exercise is good, so the baby will be healthy." Ethan didn't find anything strange about this and agreed with what Talia said. After all, he couldn't let Talia lie at home all the time, as her resistance would decrease. He got up first, and Talia followed. Ethan found a few warm-down jackets for Talia in the closet and prepared a hat, scarf, and gloves. Talia looked at herself in the mirror, all bundled up, and found it amusing. She said to Ethan, "I'm going to turn into a dumpling." Unexpectedly, Ethan just gave a plain glance and thought it was normal to dress like that. "I was just afraid you'd catch a cold, that's why I wanted you to wear more." Talia felt her body wasn't that fragile. Just then, Ethan saw Victoria outside and said to Talia, "Let's ask Mom to be the judge." Victoria, hearing Ethan mention her name, happened to stop. Hearing what Ethan said, she immediately called out from outside, "It's quite cold today, you should wear more." Hearing this, Ethan turned to look at Talia. Talia shrugged, helplessly muttering under her breath, "That's because Mom listens to you." Probably sensing the slight dissatisfaction in her voice, Ethan made a concession. "Then no gloves, but you have to keep your hands in your pockets when you're outside." Only then did Talia's expression brighten. Ethan then told Victoria they were leaving and took Talia out. In the car, Ethan sat with Talia in the back, letting the assistant drive them to the park. Just outside the park, they saw many rental carts for tourists. You could just turn the steering wheel and drive them around the park automatically. Ethan felt that although these carts were slow, whether fast or slow, there would definitely be wind. He was afraid the cold wind would make Talia sick, so at first, he didn't want her to ride in one. But with Talia's persistence, Ethan finally agreed to let her drive for a short distance. After that, she couldn't drive anymore. Chapter 28. Without a word, Talia chose a pink cart and got in. Ethan followed closely behind. He sat next to Talia, letting her control the steering wheel. She drove the cart at a moderate speed, but even Ethan could feel gusts of cold wind hitting his face. After driving for a while, just as Ethan was about to tell Talia to stop, he saw a crowd blocking the path ahead. It seemed like they were arguing about something. Neither Talia nor Ethan wanted to get involved, so they simply parked the cart in a designated spot. They walked along the park's pebble path. The park had many traditional-style buildings and some fountains. It looked like there were a few fish caves inside, but since it was winter, the water temperature probably couldn't support fish. After all, the water was likely to freeze. Suddenly, they heard the sound of someone singing opera in the distance. Ethan and Talia followed the sound. They saw an opera troupe performing in a pavilion across from them, with many tourists taking pictures. The two stood side by side, leaning against each other, listening to the opera. A cold wind blew, and Talia shivered. Ethan immediately pulled her into his arms, her cheek pressed against his broad chest, the warm and strong beat of his heart echoing in her ear. Fearing Talia would get cold, Ethan wrapped her hands in his. After being out for about 3 or 4 hours, Ethan finally took Talia home. When Talia got home, she immediately burrowed into the blankets. When Ethan saw this, he began to wonder if she had caught a cold. Fortunately, before they came home, he had asked Victoria to heat up the chicken soup and prepare a bowl of ginger soup to warm her up. Not long after lying down, Ethan brought her the chicken soup and ginger soup. Talia turned her head and looked at him helplessly. She shook her head, indicating she couldn't drink that much. Ethan immediately explained his reasons for giving her the 2 bowls of soup. Hearing him say that, and knowing it was all for her health, Talia thought for a moment and then relented. "I can drink it, but can I just drink half of 1 bowl?" She blinked at Ethan coquettishly. Seeing that expression, Ethan's heart nearly melted. He reluctantly agreed that Talia could drink just half, but she had to drink half of both bowls. Ethan first watched Talia intently as she finished half a bowl of chicken soup. But then he received a call from the company. In the time it took him to step out to answer the call, Talia, who had been lying in bed drinking soup, disappeared. And the 2 bowls of soup he had brought were also gone. Ethan immediately put down his phone and went to look for Talia. He checked the kitchen, living room, bedroom, and even the bathroom, but couldn't find her. It wasn't until Ethan reached the back garden that he saw Talia, stealthily standing by the flower bushes. He watched as she poured the 2 half bowls of soup she was holding into the bushes. He frowned slightly, thinking it was a good thing he had only filled them halfway. Talia felt something was not right and tentatively looked back. She saw Ethan standing there, watching her. She looked guiltily at the empty bowls in her hands from which she had just poured the soup. She didn't know what to say. She could only complain pitifully to Ethan. "There's too much soup. I really can't finish it." Chapter 29. Ethan had only wanted Talia to drink some ginger soup to warm up and some chicken soup to nourish her body because he thought she might have caught a chill. It was genuinely for her well-being. Seeing her pour out the effort he had prepared just like that, and thinking about what might happen if she got sick, Ethan instantly regretted taking her out that day. He became very angry about the matter. He suppressed his anger and said in a low, soft voice, "If you don't drink these soups to nourish yourself, how will you get better?" Talia clearly understood that Ethan was making her drink so much soup for her own good. She lowered her head, not knowing what to say. Ethan realized Talia was upset. Then, as if he had thought of something, he walked up to her and said, "All right, there's still half a pot in the kitchen. Be good and drink your soup, and I'll take you out to play next time." This seemed to work wonders on Talia, and she quickly agreed. Fearing she had caught a chill from the cold wind, Ethan had her take a hot bath after she finished her soup, then rest in her room before going to sleep. Pregnant women should maintain good sleep. Though reluctant, Talia took her clothes into the bathroom for the sake of the baby. When she came out, Ethan also took his pajamas and went in. After all, even though the weather was cold, the moment he took Talia out, he had become nervous and broken out in a cold sweat. This period had been a mix of surprise and wonder for Ethan. He could almost see himself and Talia in their old age, sitting in the garden, playing chess, and chatting about gossip. Lost in thought, he forgot he was taking a shower. Perhaps Talia, outside, was wondering why he was taking so long and knocked on the door. The knock jolted Ethan back to reality. He then said, "I'm done, I'll be right out." He came out of the bathroom with a towel loosely tied around his waist. Water dripped from his hair, tracing a path down his muscular torso before disappearing into the towel. Talia sat there, looking at Ethan suspiciously, as if he had been up to no good in the bathroom. Ethan explained, "I was just thinking about something else and lost track of time while showering." She still stared at him intently, finally asking with a hint of doubt, "Really?" Seeing she still didn't believe him, Ethan suddenly smirked, pounced onto the bed, and leaned towards Talia with amusement. "Then what does Talia think I was doing?" Talia's face flushed with embarrassment, and she refused to say what she had been thinking. Ethan nonchalantly used his fingers to brush aside a lock of black hair on her soft, white shoulder. It was still a bit damp. A mole was revealed on her collarbone. The mole had nowhere to hide, peeking out shyly. Talia didn't know what Ethan was planning. She felt that his gaze on the mole on her collarbone was a bit dangerous. She subconsciously tried to put her hair back. Ethan anticipated this move and grabbed her wrist. He then caressed the mole on her collarbone. The moment they touched, he lowered his head, leaned closer to her, and his lips landed on her collarbone, kissing it gently. Chapter 30, but he quickly pulled away, a faint smile playing on his lips, his voice clear. Jason translated text, "Rest early, wifey." Talia looked at him with adoring eyes and teased with a happy face, "You still like to kiss here, just like before." Ethan turned to look at her, the corners of his lips curling up almost imperceptibly, his voice gentle. "I like all of you." Then, chuckling, he went to sleep on the sofa. Victoria, outside, was shocked to see her son sleeping on the sofa. "Ethan, why are you sleeping on the sofa?" Ethan said with a straight face. "Well, Talia is pregnant, isn't she? I'm afraid my sleeping posture might be bad and I might press on the baby." Victoria, seeing how considerate Ethan was, first smiled, but then her expression stiffened. Why don't you just sleep in the guest room? Aren't there other rooms?" "It's fine, the sofa is quite soft. Mom, you should go to bed too." The next day, as soon as Talia got up, Ethan had breakfast ready, as if he could guess exactly when she would wake up. Ethan quickly had Talia sit down and personally fed her. Talia, exasperated, said to Ethan, "I'm pregnant, not disabled. I can eat by myself." "I want to feed you, so I will feed you," Ethan's gentle, low voice echoed in her ear, repetitive and somewhat mesmerizing, with a hint of childishness that she couldn't shake from her mind. All right, all right." When Victoria came out of her room, she saw Ethan feeding Talia breakfast again. Although this had brought Ethan out of his grief, Victoria still couldn't help but want to say something to him. But the assistant beside her held her back, preventing her from speaking her mind. Watching Ethan's smiling face, she held back her tears and turned away. Recently, whenever he wanted to take Talia out shopping or for fun, he needed the assistant to drive, because he wanted to sit with Talia in the back seat to ensure her safety. Secondly, the car accident had left a shadow on Ethan. Even though it turned out to be a false alarm, Ethan still couldn't bring himself to grip the steering wheel and drive anymore. So he simply had the assistant stay at his house, making it convenient for him to go anywhere. Today, he had other business to attend to at the company, and he wanted to give Talia a surprise. Talia, as usual, saw Ethan off at the door as he left for the company. In the car, Ethan began to ask the assistant, "What do you think girls like?" The assistant felt it was pointless to ask him. "Mr. Sterling, I've never been in a relationship, so I don't know. But don't you know what the missus likes, Mr. Sterling? After all, you've been married for so many years." Only then did Ethan give a wry smile. "I'm so nervous, I forgot I'm the one who knows her best." Chapter 31. While working at the company, Ethan would often find himself spacing out. He would stare at the photo of Talia on his desk for a long time. It was fine when he was alone, but occasionally, an employee would come in to discuss a project and would notice Ethan suddenly lost in thought. It was always the assistant beside him, who would stop the employee from waking Ethan up mid-trance. The employee would stand there for a good 5 minutes before Ethan would slowly come back to his senses and nonchalantly tell him to continue. But when the employee went to get a document, he would still deliberately glance at the photo in the frame. He knew who it was at a glance, but this small action was noticed by Ethan. He snapped, "Is it that interesting to look at?" The employee was so frightened he grabbed the document and rushed out of the office. Ethan glared at his retreating figure. Thankfully, nothing more was said after that. After work, Ethan went to the mall to pick out things Talia liked. He visited almost every type of store, spending tens of thousands on gifts, big and small. On the way home, sitting in the back seat looking at the presents, Ethan couldn't stop smiling. When he got home, he carried the gifts himself and eagerly rushed into their room. Talia was in the room, knitting a scarf. Hearing the commotion, she looked towards the door. Seeing so many things in Ethan's hands, she asked, "Ethan, did you go to a wholesale market?" Ethan, seeing her knitting a scarf, didn't immediately mention what he had bought. "Talia, where did you get that?" Talia, still knitting, said, "Oh, this. I told Mom today that I see you going out all the time and we don't have a scarf for you at home, so I bought some materials to knit one for you." Ethan didn't really like her doing chores while pregnant, but he also felt that Talia was preparing a gift for him with her own hands, so she must be doing it out of love. And he couldn't help but feel happy himself. Talia, seeing Ethan spacing out and not saying anything, asked, "You still haven't told me why you bought so many things on your trip out." Ethan chuckled, then pulled a bag from the many and took out its contents to show Talia. It was a dress with an adjustable waist. "Well, you're pregnant, and this dress can still look very nice." Talia's eyes lit up as she examined the dress. The color and style were indeed what she liked. She beamed, her voice sweet and full of undisguised pleasure. "Thank you, I love it." Seeing the smile on Talia's face, Ethan felt happy from the bottom of his heart. A very gratified expression appeared on his face. "As long as you like it." Then, without another word, he sat beside her, quietly watching her knit the scarf. He placed the other gifts on the desk. Talia worked the needle and yarn, wrapping it around her hands and the needle. Ethan could already imagine himself wearing the scarf. He couldn't help but grin. Chapter 32. Talia happened to see this and tried to hold back a laugh. "What's with that expression?" Only then did Ethan realize. Seeing Talia trying to suppress her laughter, his face turned slightly red. No expression, he then hastily left. After he left, he came back after a while and peeked from outside the door. Talia kept her head down, focused on her knitting, completely unaware that Ethan was still outside. But Ethan watched with great interest. This sneaky behavior was discovered by Victoria, who had just come out. At first, she found it very childish, but then Victoria suddenly remembered that when Ethan was young, he also liked to peek from outside the door, watching the people inside with great interest. She remembered at that time, she was organizing photo albums in her room. He could have just come in and looked openly, but Ethan's behavior made it seem like she was doing something wrong. Thinking of this, a smile curved Victoria's lips. She suddenly began to miss his childhood. She also felt that she was getting old too fast, and her child was growing up too quickly. But as soon as Victoria took a step forward, she noticed that Ethan was staring at Talia inside. She was pulled back from her memories. Her face was once again etched with weariness and sorrow. She then stepped forward and patted Ethan on the shoulder. Only then did Ethan's gaze shift from Talia to Victoria. "Mom, what's wrong?" Victoria first glanced into the room, then pulled Ethan away, her voice somewhat secretive before she spoke. "Your father is coming back in a few days." Ethan, however, felt that his father returning from a business trip was a perfectly normal thing. It felt strange coming from Victoria's mouth. It was as if something had happened at home that his father couldn't know about. "Dad's coming back is a good thing, isn't it? What's wrong, Mom?" Victoria didn't know how to continue, so she found another excuse. "No, it's just that your father is coming back from a business trip, so he'll definitely be tired. You know, when your father gets tired, he tends to get angry easily. Talia is pregnant, we can't let him pick a fight with her." Hearing this, Ethan finally breathed a sigh of relief. "I thought it was something serious." "Don't worry, Mom. Dad may have a bad temper, but even so, with Talia carrying a child, he won't take it out on her." Victoria nodded. "But it's better to be careful." Ethan understood Victoria's good intentions and agreed with her, but when his father, Arthur, returned, he didn't lose his temper as Victoria had said. In fact, he was much gentler than before. This winter was much colder than last year. Because Talia was pregnant, Ethan didn't take her out to buy New Year's goods. But when Ethan went to buy them, he specifically asked Talia what she wanted before he left. Looking at the items on his phone's notepad being checked off one by one, Ethan couldn't help but feel happy. He had recently realized that he was becoming more and more inseparable from Talia. Even if he was away for a short while, when he returned, it felt like a reunion after a long separation. Chapter 33, when he returned, Talia was standing at the door to welcome him. Seeing this, Ethan immediately got angry. After all, Talia's body was always frail in the winter, and she was particularly susceptible to colds. On top of that, she was now carrying a child, so her immune system was definitely weaker than before. The moment Talia saw Ethan, she realized something and immediately ran back to her room. Who knew that the first thing Ethan did when he got home was to put down the New Year's goods he had bought and head straight for Talia. Seeing this, Talia immediately hid under the covers. Ethan, seeing Talia wrapped up like a cocoon, didn't know what to say. He could only helplessly turn up the air conditioner's temperature. Then he went out and put all the things he had bought into the kitchen. This Chinese New Year, Ethan had no intention of inviting Talia's parents and brother over for dinner. After all, they were only after money, and they weren't good to Talia. Ethan didn't want to see their faces on such a happy occasion. However, as the new year approached, the company had to give its employees a few days off. After discussing with Talia, they decided to work extra hard for a few days before the new year so that everyone could be happy after the new year. So, for these few days, in order to finish all the work and have a happy new year, he slept at the company. But his calls to Talia never stopped. After staying at the company for 3 or 4 consecutive days, the new year was getting closer and closer. When he finally finished all the work and procedures, it was already the early morning of New Year's Eve when he got home. Ethan was very quiet when he came back, just to avoid waking up the others in the house, especially Talia. After a simple wash-up in the bathroom, he saw Talia rubbing her eyes and standing outside the door. Ethan immediately walked up to her and asked, "Why are you still awake?" But Talia said groggily, "I think I sensed you came home. I woke up in the middle of my sleep." Because she wasn't fully awake, her voice was still nasal, soft, and gentle, inexplicably endearing. Ethan, feeling helpless, turned off the light, hugged Talia, and led her into the room. They fell asleep together in Talia's room. Ethan had originally intended to go to the sofa to sleep after Talia fell asleep. But he saw Talia staring at him, unwilling to sleep, so he simply gave up. Because he had just finished work and had been rushing home through the night, even though the company wasn't far from home, his heart had been longing to return, longing for Talia. The moment he lay down, he felt extremely tired. He was almost about to fall asleep, but his mind was still clear. The moment he saw Talia, he suddenly didn't want to sleep anymore. He leaned over to her, his soft lips kissing her chin and his cheek gently rubbing against hers. "I missed you," Ethan whispered. They had been apart for about 3 or 4 days, but it felt like a year or even longer. Even though they had been talking on the phone, it couldn't alleviate Ethan's longing for Talia. Even though Talia had woken up in the middle of the night and was still quite sleepy, she resisted the urge to close her eyes and sleep. Instead, she whispered in a coaxing tone in Ethan's ear, "I missed you too." Then, she pulled Ethan to lie down beside her. Chapter 34. With the lights off, Ethan could only grope in the dark, reaching out to hold Talia. He moved closer to her hair, feeling the fragrance of her strands up close, one hand tightly gripping hers, unwilling to let go. He didn't know how long they held hands, but he could feel Talia's hand gently squeezing back. Talia also sensed that Ethan was still awake and asked, "Were you tired these past few days?" To keep Talia from worrying, Ethan said, "Not tired." But Talia wasn't so easily fooled. When he first came in, she had seen the dark circles under his eyes. He could barely keep his eyes open, yet he was still saying he wasn't tired. "I saw the panda makeup on your face just now." Ethan had forgotten to look in the mirror when he washed up. He asked, half believing, "Really? Don't you lie to me?" Finally, Talia smiled and urged, "Yes, you should go to sleep now. Otherwise, Mom and Dad will find it funny seeing you with two black eyes on New Year's Day." Then, Talia reached over to the nightstand and turned on the small nightlight. At this, Ethan could see Talia's wide eyes looking at him. Realizing she was also quite tired, he asked, "You're not sleeping?" Talia didn't know why. Perhaps she was amused by what she had just said. She suddenly felt less sleepy than before. "I'll watch you for a while. You go to sleep." Hearing that Talia was going to watch him sleep, Ethan felt like he had gone back to the time not long after they were married. Back then, Talia always said she felt like she was dreaming. She couldn't believe she was already married to him. This foolishness brought a low chuckle from Ethan. He reached up and touched Talia's face, saying, "Silly." But it was a lie to say he wasn't tired. After so many days at the company without a good night's sleep and working for so long, the bed was soft and comfortable. Ethan finally succumbed to the deep wave of sleepiness and quickly fell asleep. In a daze, Ethan thought he heard a very quiet good night. The next day, when he woke up, Talia was already gone from beside him. His head, which had been groggy, instantly cleared. Ethan threw off the covers, got out of bed, put on his shoes, and first went to the bathroom to wash up thoroughly. Then he saw Talia and Victoria busy cooking in the kitchen. Arthur, who was sitting on the sofa reading the newspaper, saw him come out after brushing his teeth and started to tease him, waking up so late on New Year's Eve. At this, Victoria, hearing the voice, looked over from the kitchen. Seeing Ethan, she started to scold Arthur. "Ethan has been working so hard at the company, he probably got back very late. It's rare for him to come back and get a good night's sleep. Let him sleep in a little. Young people need to replenish their energy. You think he's like you, an old man?" Then she came out of the kitchen and handed Ethan a sandwich. It was still warm in his hand. "You must be hungry. Have a sandwich to tide you over." Arthur looked at the sandwich in Ethan's hand with envy. When Ethan noticed, he was about to hand the sandwich to his father. But Victoria saw it and warned Arthur, "Don't you eat this. Wait, I'll go get you some porridge." Noticing Arthur's aggrieved look, Ethan shrugged helplessly, indicating he couldn't do anything about it. Chapter 35. So Arthur had no choice but to reluctantly eat his plain white porridge. Talia also poured Ethan a glass of hot milk. Ethan was overjoyed. He first thanked Talia, then showed off the glass of hot milk to Arthur. Arthur knew he couldn't have these things, so he decided to ignore it and silently drank his porridge. In the middle of this, some other Sterling relatives called, asking if they wanted to come over for a visit. Seeing Arthur's hesitation, Ethan snatched the phone and refused their invitation. After all, they hadn't visited each other in over a decade, and that branch of the family had previously stolen money from his father's savings. Now they were inviting them over. It probably wasn't for anything good. The moment they stole the money, any semblance of a blood relationship was essentially severed. Arthur, seeing Ethan snatch his phone and hearing what he said, didn't stop him. He even heard them talking about considering their kinship and helping them out. Ethan found it laughable and hung up the phone, then blocked their contact information. He knew his father best. If they kept pestering him, his father might soften. After handling everything, Ethan returned the phone to Arthur. He then reminded him again, "Dad, don't you dare unblock them from the blacklist." Ethan turned to see what Talia was doing, but seeing them busy chopping and stir-frying in the kitchen, the step he was about to take, he retracted. Figuring he wouldn't be much help even if he went in, he simply sat down next to Arthur. Then they started talking about what to name their future grandson or granddaughter. Hearing Ethan's words, Arthur also began to think seriously. If it's a boy, let's call him Ethan Jr. If it's a granddaughter, let's call her Charlotte. Ethan, seeing how quickly Arthur had come up with names, also thought about it for a moment. Ethan Jr. and Charlotte, they were actually quite nice names. I'll ask for Talia's opinion tonight. Arthur was stunned for a moment, then replied, okay. We can also think of a few more names and then let the child choose by drawing lots. Ethan nodded. By noon, Talia and Victoria had brought out a 5-course meal with soup, arranged on the table like a flower. The dishes were all relatively light, as Ethan had specifically mentioned that since Talia was pregnant, she should eat less spicy food. However, there were still some spicy dishes, but Ethan probably wouldn't let Talia touch them. According to their annual routine, they would prepare all the ingredients in the morning, have a simple lunch, go out for a walk in the afternoon, and in the evening, they would gather around the TV to watch the New Year's gala and eat their reunion dinner. But Ethan couldn't help but exclaim, I thought lunch was supposed to be simple. Why is it so lavish? Victoria replied, although it's not the New Year's Eve dinner, it's still New Year's Eve. We can't be too careless with lunch. Chapter 36. Talia also backed up Victoria. Mom is right. The main thing is, we seem to have bought too many ingredients. If we don't eat more for lunch, we might not be able to finish it all tonight. Hearing that this was the real reason, Ethan didn't say anything more. After dinner, Talia was about to clear the dishes, but Ethan beat her to it. He then said to her, it's not right for the person who cooked to also have to do the dishes. Talia's voice was soft and sweet. Then how come you never helped me with the dishes before? Ethan, carrying the dishes from the table, ran into the kitchen without answering her question. Then he silently washed the dishes in the kitchen. Perhaps he was too much of a perfectionist, or perhaps he didn't know how to wash dishes, which was why he was so slow. Victoria, outside, saw Ethan washing dishes and couldn't help but say to Arthur, look at you, have you washed a single dish in all these years? Arthur, however, was very self-righteous. Well, you wouldn't even give me a sandwich just now, and you're talking about me not washing dishes. Finally, after Ethan finished washing the dishes, it was time to go out for a walk. Even though Ethan was reluctant to take the pregnant Talia out, he had no choice but to take her out this one time. This time, Ethan once again bundled Talia up into a thick dumpling. Why do I have to wear so many clothes again? It's not as cold today as it was before. Seeing Talia's aggrieved look, Ethan completely pretended not to hear or see. Ethan picked up a hat and put it on her head, smiling as he asked, I think you're not wearing enough. I was thinking about whether you should wear more. Talia immediately waved her hands in refusal. I don't need to wear any more. I won't be able to walk if I wear any more. Ethan, still holding a scarf, first held it in his hand, pretending to think seriously, and said, if you can't walk, I'll carry you. He smiled and put the scarf on Talia. Like a child, he stood in front of her, admiring his own handiwork. And Talia looked at Ethan with a resentful expression, like a kitten that was angry but helpless. Seeing this, Ethan tentatively tugged at her hat and said, you don't want to go out. If you don't want to go out, you don't have to wear so much. Talia's expression became even more reluctant. She blinked her eyes and said, I want to go out. I've been cooped up at home for so long, I'm going to get moldy. Ethan knew Talia definitely wanted to go out and play. So, either you dress warmly and go out, or we don't go out at all. Under his coercion and inducement, Talia finally gave in. The family of 4 walked together on the streets outside, shopping. It was New Year's Eve, and there were many people outside, making it very lively. Since he had misunderstood that Talia didn't like him, he had rarely taken her out to play. And now it was winter, and she was pregnant. But now that the new year had passed, their family was complete. After shopping, none of them really wanted to go home to eat. They started drooling at the sight of all the delicious food outside. But as long as there was one rational person in the group, it was fine. Ethan, seeing the sky getting darker, hurried them home for their New Year's Eve dinner. Chapter 37. After the cold winter passed, Talia's belly had begun to show. As the temperature warmed up slightly, Talia pestered Ethan to take her out to play. This time, Ethan had no reason to refuse. The sunlight outside still had some warmth. they sat on a park bench, watching a group of children play. It made them wonder if their own child, when born, would be as mischievous and active as them. Ethan suddenly remembered something and asked Talia, "By the way, I forgot to tell you something. Last New Year's Eve, my dad gave our child a name. If it's a boy, he'll be called Ethan Jr. And if it's a girl, she'll be called Charlotte. What do you think, Talia?" Talia smiled and thought about it seriously. She quickly gave her answer, "They're both lovely names, I like them both." Then it's settled. Unintentionally, Ethan noticed Talia's ears were red. Perhaps from the sun, or perhaps from shyness. Ethan reached up and pinched her increasingly red ear, then leaned in and kissed her. Their lips touched for a second before Talia lightly pinched him and softly called his name. At first, Ethan thought it was a sign of affection, but then he heard Talia say, "Those kids are looking over here. Aren't you embarrassed?" Talia's words immediately made Ethan spring back from her. He looked behind him and saw the group of children watching them curiously. Ethan was so embarrassed he could only cover it up with a cough. Perhaps finding them uninteresting, the children went back to playing by themselves. When she spoke, if she dragged out the last syllable, her tone would be soft and a little like a cute, pouting complaint. "You really are something. It's not like you didn't know there were kids playing over there and you still." As she spoke, Talia covered her mouth, her eyes still holding a hint of complaint. Ethan meekly apologized to Talia, "I promise it won't happen again." As Talia's belly grew bigger, Ethan would often take her for walks, but not too far. He even specifically asked the doctor what pregnant women should pay attention to in the later months. Ethan was meticulous even when cooking and feeding her. He would make sure the temperature was just right before feeding Talia, and he would check if pregnant women could eat something before giving it to her. Wherever Talia went, whatever she did, he had to support her before he could feel at ease. Talia, however, felt that Ethan's nerves had been too on edge recently. She wasn't even that nervous about her own body. "Ethan, I'm really fine. Besides a bit of backache, I can eat and walk on my own." Ethan felt that everything he was doing was absolutely necessary. After all, the loss of the last child had left a deep shadow on him. This child could not be lost. "I just feel that as your husband, I have a duty to take care of you. Last time, it was because I didn't take good care of you, I was always busy with work. Now, my most important job is waiting for the baby to be born." Talia knew she couldn't win against him, so she didn't bring it up again. The further along she was, the more nervous Ethan became. He would even stay by her side all day, terrified that her due date would suddenly arrive. Talia was also tormented by her belly, unable to sleep through the night. As the baby grew bigger, it became less and less still. It would constantly kick her in the belly. Whenever this happened, Ethan would gently stroke her belly and whisper to the baby, "You don't have to kick your mom so hard. It hurts her. If you're not heartbroken, I am." Talia's face was a little pale, but she still looked beautiful when she smiled. Chapter 38. One day, a little earlier than her due date, Ethan rushed a contracting Talia to the hospital in the middle of the night. He watched her being wheeled into the operating room with his own eyes. Even as dawn broke, there was no news of the baby. After about 4 or 5 hours, a doctor finally came out. Ethan asked him, "Doctor, how is she? Is her life in danger?" The doctor's expression was complicated, and he didn't know how to explain the situation to Ethan. It wasn't until Victoria came rushing over that the doctor's face relaxed with relief. When Ethan saw Victoria arrive at the hospital, he started telling her about how long Talia had been in the operating room. But Victoria just looked at Ethan with a worried expression. This made him feel very strange. And Victoria, who had always been so eager for a grandchild, showed no anxiety on her face knowing Talia was giving birth. "Mom, why aren't you worried at all that something might happen?" Victoria knew the charade was over. After all, where could she possibly get a baby for Ethan? "Ethan, listen to Mom." But Ethan, as if sensing something, refused to listen to Victoria. But Victoria knew this couldn't go on any longer. No matter how much Ethan didn't want to hear it, she still told him the truth. "Talia can't possibly have a child because it was all your own fantasy. Talia died 10 months ago. You held her funeral yourself. And all this time, you've been with a Talia you imagined." Ethan struggled to control his breathing to hide the pain in his heart, but the trembling in his voice betrayed him. "No, Talia is in the operating room. I saw her being wheeled in. He frantically asked the doctor to prove it. But the doctor's answer was a crushing blow to Ethan. Mr. Sterling, we were just playing along with you yesterday. When we received the call, we didn't see any pregnant woman with you. There is no pregnant woman in labor in the operating room, and there is no baby. If we hadn't received a call from your mother in the middle of it, we wouldn't have known what to do. These words shattered Ethan's sanity. He looked at the expressions on Victoria and the doctor's faces. His face was gaunt, his eyes looked as if they were about to bleed, and his voice was low and hoarse. How is that possible? Talia was alive and with me. How could she be a figment of my imagination? It can't be just me who saw Talia. Mom, you saw her too. Every time we ate, you brought us 2 sets of utensils, and you made chicken soup for Talia, and you talked to Talia, didn't you? Victoria wiped away a tear. That was all me pretending. I never saw Talia. You were talking to yourself the whole time. If you don't believe me, ask your assistant. My assistant? Yes, my assistant. He must have seen Talia. He often called her. Ethan began to doubt himself. He looked at the assistant in the corner as if he were his last hope. The assistant couldn't bear to tell Ethan the truth, but he didn't want to lie anymore either. He remained silent. As the seconds ticked by and Ethan didn't get an answer from the assistant, the light in his eyes gradually dimmed. He paused, the words he was about to say becoming incredibly difficult, a bitter taste spreading in his mouth. It was all fake. Chapter 39. In reality, the last shred of his fantasy had been completely shattered, but he still refused to admit it. He refused to accept the truth. Ethan burst into the operating room and saw only a group of doctors cleaning up. Talia, who should have been on the operating table giving birth, was gone. Talia, who should have been lying on the operating table, was gone. No, Talia was just here. How did she suddenly disappear? Ethan rushed out and questioned the doctors. Did you move Talia? You can't fool me. Give Talia back to me. The doctors, seeing his state, immediately held him back and explained. Mr. Sterling, please calm down. We didn't hide Talia. She was never here. How could that be? I've been with her all this time. I bought her so many gifts. We went to the park, the garden together. As he spoke, he suddenly remembered something, and tears rolled down from his eyes, one after another, soaking the front of his shirt. All of Ethan's conversations with Talia had been him talking to himself. He had drunk the chicken soup and ginger soup himself and poured them in the garden. He had watered the garden himself. He had gone out to play by himself. In Ethan's memory, everything related to Talia was done by him, and he had imagined it was her. He would create a coherent story out of all the people and events in his memory. And this so-called child never existed in reality. So naturally, the child that the Talia in his fantasy was supposed to give birth to after 10 months of pregnancy, Mr. Sterling couldn't find a substitute for in his memory. And so, the dream shattered. Victoria looked at the unconscious Ethan on the bed with a worried expression and asked the doctor, "Is there any way to help him recover?" The doctor's answer was the same as before. This kind of illness was a sickness of the heart. Mr. Sterling's behavior of taking the fake as real is actually a protective barrier he has created for himself. His body is instinctively protecting him. It's just a pity that this protective behavior can't last forever. Currently, there is no effective way to completely cure it. Victoria paced back and forth in the hospital room, her anxiety growing as the doctor's diagnosis remained the same. She became more and more worried about Ethan's mental state. After all, during the 10 months when he was talking to thin air, at least Ethan had been happy. If he woke up this time and reverted to the state he was in right after Talia died, not eating or drinking, his body would eventually suffer serious problems. During the time Ethan was in a coma, Victoria had even contacted a psychologist from abroad. This behavior was a typical form of self-deception used for self-protection. Once this protective barrier was broken, the patient would plummet from extreme happiness to extreme sadness. Almost no one could handle such an emotional shift and drop. So, during the patient's self-protection process, family and friends should cooperate with the patient, allowing them to slowly accept the truth. In a situation like Ethan's, there was no other way. It was up to Ethan himself. Anything anyone else said would be useless. It would only further agitate his emotions. Day after day passed, and Ethan still showed no signs of waking up. Chapter 40, she asked the doctor, who said that situations like Ethan's, where a patient remains in a coma, have happened before. It meant the patient was unwilling to face reality and chose to sleep forever. It could be considered a form of a vegetative state in another sense. The only way is to talk to the patient more, preferably someone he cares about the most. But if his emotions are still unstable after he wakes up, it might actually be better for him to remain asleep like this. Victoria certainly didn't want to see her son sleep his life away in a hospital bed. She tried every possible way to wake him up. The person he cared about the most, it could only be Talia. Now, even she, his own mother, had no confidence that she was the person Ethan cared about most. So every day, she would come and talk to Ethan about the time he had spent with Talia, trying to wake him up. One day, Victoria came to the hospital to see Ethan as usual, bringing his favorite food. She pushed open the door to his room with a joyful face, only to find the bed empty, the covers thrown back. Victoria checked the bathroom and searched every place in the hospital where Ethan might be, but she couldn't find him. He was gone. Victoria immediately called Arthur and asked him to send people to look for him. She then checked the hospital's surveillance footage and saw that Ethan had woken up on his own and left the room. He had gone straight downstairs, hailed a taxi, and left. When Arthur heard the news, he immediately dropped his work. They searched the house and many other places. Then Victoria suddenly remembered a place where Ethan was highly likely to go after waking up. It was a villa by the sea that he had bought when he was hallucinating, a place he had taken the imaginary Talia. After telling Arthur this, she also rushed over there. Before Arthur arrived, he saw smoke rising in the distance from that direction. He immediately realized something was wrong and called for help. When he arrived, he saw the villa engulfed in flames. The roaring fire seemed to have gone mad. A wind picked up, and the flames spread wildly, devouring everything without restraint. Arthur ordered his men to quickly find a way to get seawater to extinguish the out-of-control fire. Even though he knew the fire was probably impossible to put out, he relentlessly had his men transport water. He even joined in himself. But the crimson flames, like a field of wild grass doused in a rapid growth agent, were unaffected by the small amount of seawater. It wasn't until the firefighters arrived that the fire was finally extinguished, but they heard there was still someone inside. Judging by the intensity of the fire, even if there was someone, the chances of survival were slim. When Victoria heard this, she fainted. Arthur first took Victoria to the hospital, then waited for the police to investigate the villa. When Victoria woke up, she kept asking Arthur about Ethan, whether he had been rescued. Just then, the police knocked on the door. Arthur immediately got up and went over, but Victoria was not at ease and followed him. Based on the subtle traces at the scene, the police had also found the ashes of a second person. Victoria quickly identified the owner of these ashes, Talia. After investigating the scene, the police determined that the fire was deliberately set and ultimately ruled the case a suicide.